welcome to the Unclassified Horror. I'm here to make your nights a little more interesting and maybe a little more unsettling. This channel is for those who enjoy realistic horror, the kind that feels possible, the kind that could happen on a quiet trail, deep in the woods, far from help. But before we step into the deep woods tonight, take a second to check if you're subscribed. We're a small group of explorers right now, and every single one of you matters. If you love the silence of the forest but fear what's hiding in it, join us. Let's get to 1,000 before the sun goes down. Subscribe the channel, hit the bell icon, and let me know from where you're listening. Now, turn off the lights and let's begin. The fire lookout tower on Raven Ridge has been automated since 1985. No one climbs those stairs anymore. But every night at 9 p.m., rangers see a flashlight beam moving up the tower's staircase. Methodically, step by step, climbing to the observation deck to maintain a light that doesn't need maintaining anymore. My name is Morgan Ashford. I worked as a district ranger for the Cherokee National Forest in eastern Tennessee for 9 years. My district included Raven Ridge, a remote section of the forest with a fire lookout tower that had been built in 1938 and automated in 1985. The automation meant no one needed to staff the tower anymore. Sensors detected smoke, cameras monitored the forest, everything was computerized. But someone was still climbing those stairs every night, and they had been for the past 40 years. Fire lookout towers are a relic of early 20th century forest management. Before satellites and automated systems, the Forest Service built thousands of them. Tall structures placed on high ridges where a human observer could watch for smoke during fire season. The job was lonely. Lookout keepers would spend weeks or months alone in a small cabin at the top of a tower, watching the forest, maintaining the equipment, reporting any signs of fire. Most of the towers have been decommissioned now, torn down or left to rot. But some, like the one on Raven Ridge, were converted to automated monitoring stations and kept in service. The tower on Raven Ridge is 70 feet tall. Steel frame, metal stairs spiraling up, a small observation cabin at the top with windows on all 4 sides, and automated weather monitoring equipment that transmits data to the district office. No one has staffed it full-time since 1985, but the reports started almost immediately after automation. The first sighting was logged in November 1985. A hunter camping near the base of Raven Ridge reported seeing a light moving up the tower's stairs at night. He assumed it was a ranger doing maintenance, but when he mentioned it to the district office the next day, he was told no one had been to the tower in over a month. The sightings continued. Hikers, hunters, other rangers, always the same description. A flashlight beam moving up the stairs at a steady, methodical pace, always at night, always starting around 9 p.m., taking approximately 15 minutes to reach the top, and then the light in the observation cabin would come on, would stay on for 30 to 40 minutes, and then go out. And the flashlight beam would descend the stairs at the same steady pace. When I took over the Raven Ridge district in 2015, the tower sightings were part of my briefing. My supervisor, a man named Victor Salazar, who had worked the district for 18 years, told me matter-of-factly, "You'll get reports about lights in the tower. Document them, log them, but don't waste time trying to investigate. It's been happening since 1985. We've sent rangers up there during the sightings. The tower is always empty. The equipment works fine. there's never any sign of unauthorized entry. "What do you think it is?" I asked. Victor looked at me. "I think," he said carefully, "that the tower is still being maintained by someone who doesn't know they're not needed anymore." I saw it for the first time in July of my first year. I was doing a perimeter check of the Raven Ridge area at dusk. The tower is visible from several points along the Ridge Trail. At 9:08 p.m., I saw the light. A flashlight beam, moving up the stairs, slow, steady. I grabbed my binoculars, focused on the tower. The beam was clear, moving in the pattern you'd expect from someone climbing stairs with a flashlight in hand, sweeping left and right slightly to illuminate each step, pausing at the landings, continuing upward. I couldn't see who was holding the flashlight. The beam was too bright, but someone was definitely there. I radioed it in. "This is Ashford. I have visual on the tower. Someone is climbing the stairs right now. I can see the flashlight." Victor's voice came back. "Copy that. How far up?" "Maybe 40 feet, I said. "Still ascending." "Stay on visual," Victor said. "I'm sending Marlowe to check the base of the tower." Ranger Helen Marlowe reached the base of the tower in 12 minutes. By then, the flashlight beam had reached the top. The light in the observation cabin had come on. Helen radioed from the base. "I'm at the tower. All access gates are locked. No vehicles in the area. No signs of entry. Can you see the light in the cabin?" "Affirmative," Helen said. "It's on. Windows are lit." "Go up," Victor said. "Check the cabin." Helen hesitated. "Sir, the access gate is locked. I don't have the key." "Then climb over it," Victor said. There was a pause. Then Helen said, "Copy that." I watched through binoculars as Helen climbed the fence around the tower base, started up the stairs. Her own flashlight beam joined the light from above. I could track her progress by the way her light moved. She climbed for 10 minutes, reached the observation deck. Her radio clicked. "I'm at the cabin," she said. Her voice was different, quieter. "The door's locked. Windows are dark." I looked through the binoculars. She was right. The cabin was dark, but 60 seconds earlier, I had been looking at lit windows. I had seen them clearly. "Helen," I said, "the lights were on when you started climbing. I was watching." "Well, they're not on now," Helen said, "and the door's locked from the outside. No one's been in here." Helen came back down, met me at the trailhead 20 minutes later. "The cabin was empty," she said. "No signs of entry, no footprints in the dust. The equipment was running normally. But—" she stopped. "But what?" I said. "There was a logbook," she said, "on the desk inside. Old, like really old. 1940s maybe. I looked at the last entry." She pulled out her phone, showed me a photo she'd taken through the cabin window. The logbook was open to a page dated September 19, 1947. The handwriting was small and precise. "Must not let the light go out. Must maintain the watch. Fire season is not over. I will not fail again." Below that, the same line repeated, over and over, filling the entire page. "Must not let the light go out." I asked Victor about the logbook the next day. He pulled the file on the tower's history. "The last full-time lookout keeper was a man named Samuel Thorne," he said. "He staffed the tower from 1945 to 1947. September 19, 1947 was the day he died. "How?" I said. Victor read from the file. "Lightning strike. He was in the observation cabin during a storm. The tower was hit. He was killed instantly." "And he's the one who wrote that last log entry?" I said. "We think so," Victor said. "The handwriting matches his earlier entries." He closed the file. Samuel Thorne was known for taking his duties extremely seriously. He never missed a shift, never left the tower unattended during fire season. When the tower was struck by lightning, when he died, it was because he refused to come down during the storm. He said, Victor checked the file. He said, "Someone has to watch." The sightings continued throughout my 9 years in the district. Always the same pattern. Flashlight beam ascending the stairs around 9 p.m. Light in the cabin coming on for 30 to 40 minutes, then going dark. Flashlight beam descending. I saw it personally maybe 20 times, and every time when a ranger went up to investigate, the cabin was empty, the door was locked, and there was no trace of anyone having been there. Except, in my 3rd year, I started noticing something else. The automated equipment in the observation cabin required occasional maintenance, sensor cleaning, battery replacement, software updates, standard stuff. We scheduled maintenance visits every 3 months, but the technician who handled the Raven Ridge Tower, a man named Luis Pacheco, who'd been doing this for 15 years, started reporting something strange. "The equipment is always clean," he said. "I mean spotless. The sensors are supposed to accumulate dust and pollen and debris. That's why we clean them every 3 months. But every time I go up there, they're already clean, like someone's been maintaining them." "Maybe it's the wind," I said. The next morning I hiked to the spot where I'd seen the light disappear. It took me 20 minutes to find the location. When I did, I found a grave. Not marked, not official, just a depression in the ground about 6 feet long, and a flat stone with a name carved into it. Samuel Thorne, 1912 to 1947. I called Victor, told him what I'd found. He was quiet for a moment. "Samuel Thorne's body was never recovered after the lightning strike," he said. "The official story was that it was too badly burned to transport. They buried him near where he died." "Near the tower," I said. "Yes," Victor said. I looked at the grave, at the distance between it and the tower, maybe 200 yards, a straight line. He walks to the tower every night, climbs the stairs, maintains the equipment, checks the light, and then he walks back. Victor didn't disagree. "It's 70 feet up. There's a lot of wind." Luis shook his head. "Wind doesn't clean sensors. Wind covers them in more debris. Someone is wiping these down regularly." I started leaving test materials in the observation cabin. Small things. A screwdriver on the desk, a cleaning cloth on the windowsill, a water bottle on the floor. Every time when I returned a week later, the items had been moved. Not randomly, organized. The screwdriver placed neatly in the toolkit, the cleaning cloth folded and placed with the other maintenance supplies, the water bottle standing upright on the desk, as though someone was maintaining the space, keeping it orderly, making sure everything was where it should be. In my 7th year, I decided to spend a night on the ridge near the tower, not inside the observation cabin. That felt like an intrusion, but close enough to see what happened after dark. I set up a small camp about 200 yards from the tower base. Waited. At 9:04 p.m., the flashlight beam appeared. I watched it climb, slow, steady, methodical. It reached the top. The cabin light came on. I waited, watched. At 9:47 p.m., the cabin light went out. The flashlight beam began descending, and I realized I had never watched where the beam went after it reached the ground. I focused my binoculars on the base of the tower. The flashlight beam reached the ground, continued past the tower, into the forest, heading east. I followed it with the binoculars as far as I could. It moved in a straight line, never wavering, for maybe 200 yards, and then it went out, just stopped, as though whoever was carrying it had reached their destination. I spent my last 2 years in the district thinking about Samuel Thorne, about what it means to be so devoted to a duty that death doesn't end it. The tower has been automated for 40 years. It doesn't need a human keeper. The sensors work, the cameras work, the fire detection systems are better now than they ever were when humans staffed the towers. But Samuel Thorne doesn't know that, or if he knows, he doesn't care. Because his duty was never about the equipment. It was about the watch, about being present, about standing guard, about making sure that if a fire started, someone was there to see it. I left the Cherokee National Forest in 2024. Before I went, I hiked to Raven Ridge one last time. I brought flowers, placed them on Samuel Thorne's grave, and I said, "Thank you for your service. The forest is safe. You did your job well." I don't know if he heard me, but the reports haven't stopped. Every night at 9 p.m., rangers still see the flashlight beam climbing the stairs. Every night, the light in the observation cabin comes on for 30 to 40 minutes, and every morning, the equipment is clean. The tools are organized. The watch continues. If you ever visit the Cherokee National Forest, if you hike the ridges in the eastern section, if you see a fire lookout tower standing against the sky, go at night, wait until 9 p.m. and watch. You might see what I saw, a light moving up the stairs, slow, steady, methodical, climbing to maintain a watch that will never end, because Samuel Thorne made a promise 77 years ago. Some duties end with death, some don't, and some, the deepest ones, are carried forever by people who understood what it meant to stand watch, to be the one between the forest and the fire, to be the one who says, "Not on my watch, not while I'm here." Samuel Thorne is still here, still watching, still climbing the stairs at 9 p.m. every night, still checking the light, still making sure everything is where it should be, because that's what a keeper does. And he was the best keeper the Cherokee National Forest ever had. He promised that he would not let the light go out, that he would maintain the watch, that he would not fail. And he hasn't. Not once. Not in 40 years of automation and neglect. Not in 77 years of death. He climbs every night, and he will climb until the tower falls, or until the forest tells him that his duty is done. Whichever comes first. If these stories are keeping you hooked, subscribe and stay with us in the dark. Let's proceed with the next story. Imagine you're lost in the mountains. Night is falling. Your water is gone. A ranger appears from nowhere, gives you food and water, guides you to the trailhead, and when you turn to thank him, he's gone. My name is Iris Caldwell. 3 years ago, I got lost in the Pisgah National Forest in western North Carolina. I was rescued by a ranger who gave me water, shared his food, and walked me 4 miles through the dark to safety. When I tried to file a report to thank him officially, I was told no ranger had been dispatched to my location that day. When I described him, showed them the photo I'd taken on my phone, they showed me a file from 1956, and the photo matched exactly. The ranger who saved my life had been dead for 68 years. I need to tell this story carefully, because what happened to me has happened to dozens of people over the past 7 decades. And every time someone reports it, the Park Service documents it quietly and says nothing publicly. Because how do you explain that one of your rangers has been saving lives for 68 years after his death? How do you put that in a press release? It started on October 3rd. I was doing a solo day hike on the Art Loeb Trail, a 30-mile route through Pisgah that I'd done sections of before, but never end to end. I started at the Davidson River trailhead at 8 a.m. The plan was to hike 12 miles to a designated campsite, stay overnight, and hike out the next morning. The weather was perfect, clear, mid-60s. I made good time for the first 8 miles. And then, I made a mistake. At mile marker 8, the trail splits. The main route continues north. A side trail branches east toward an overlook. I'd been looking at my map and decided to take the overlook spur, quick detour, maybe 20 minutes round trip, then back to the main trail. I took the spur, reached the overlook, took photos, started back. And when I reached what I thought was the junction, I couldn't find the main trail. I've hiked for 15 years. I know how to navigate. I carry a map and compass. I pay attention to landmarks. But that afternoon, nothing looked right. The junction should have been a clear T intersection, easy to identify. But I was standing in a section of trail that looked like it hadn't been maintained in years. Overgrown, faint. I checked my compass. The bearing was wrong. I should have been heading north, back to the main trail, but the trail ahead of me was heading east. I backtracked to the overlook, started again. Same result. By 4 p.m., I had tried 4 different approaches. None of them led back to the main trail, and I was starting to panic. I still had water, still had food, but the sun was getting low. I had maybe 2 hours of daylight left, and I was completely turned around. I sat down, pulled out my phone. No service. I tried the GPS. It showed my location, somewhere east of where I should be, well off the trail system. I started walking west, following the compass bearing, pushing through undergrowth where no trail existed, trying to intersect the main trail route that should have been a quarter mile in that direction. I walked for an hour. The sun touched the ridgeline, and I still hadn't found the trail. At 6:30 p.m., I admitted to myself that I was lost. Genuinely, dangerously lost. I'd been off trail for 2 hours. I had no idea which direction the trailhead was, and night was coming. Fast. I found a relatively flat spot near a small creek, started setting up an emergency bivouac. I had a space blanket in my pack, some cord, a lighter. I could make it through the night. Cold, uncomfortable, but alive. And in the morning, I'd keep walking west until I hit the trail or the Forest Service road that ran along the western boundary of this section. I was building a small fire when I heard the voice. "You're pretty far off the trail." I turned. A ranger was standing about 20 feet away. Older, maybe 60, gray hair, weathered face, wearing a ranger uniform, the classic style, not the modern tactical gear that most rangers wear now. Old school. Green uniform, campaign hat. He was smiling, not mocking, not condescending, just friendly. The smile of someone who'd found plenty of lost hikers before and knew exactly how scared they were. He introduced himself as Ranger Webb, didn't give a first name, just Webb. He asked me what happened. I told him about the Overlook Spur, the missing junction, the 2 hours of trying to find my way back. He nodded. "That spur is tricky," he said. "The junction's not well marked, easy to miss on the way back." He pulled a water bottle from his pack, handed it to me. "Drink," he said. "You're probably dehydrated." I drank. The water was cold, clean. He pulled out a granola bar. "Eat this," he said. "You'll feel better." I ate, and I did feel better. Not just physically. The presence of another person, someone calm, someone competent, made the fear recede. "I'm so glad to see you," I said. My voice broke on the last word. I hadn't realized how frightened I'd been until someone arrived who could help. "You're okay," he said. "I'm here now. Let's get you sorted out." "Can you walk?" Webb asked. "Yes," I said. "Good," he said, "because we've got about 4 miles to the nearest trailhead, and I'd like to get you out before it's fully dark." He looked at my bivouac setup. "You did good here," he said. "If I hadn't found you, you'd have been fine for the night." "How did he find me?" I asked. He smiled. "I know this forest," he said. "I've been walking these trails longer than you've been alive." We started walking. Webb led. I followed. He moved confidently through terrain that had no trail, pushing through rhododendron, stepping over logs, navigating steep slopes without hesitation. He talked while we walked, told me about the forest, about the ridge systems, the water sources, the old logging roads that most maps didn't show anymore. He told me about hikers he'd helped before, people who'd gotten turned around on the same trails I'd walked, people who'd made the same mistakes. He wasn't lecturing, just talking, the way you talk to keep someone's mind occupied when they're tired and scared. I asked him how long he'd been a ranger. "Long time," he said, "since before most of these trails had official names." We walked for 2 hours. The sun went down. Webb pulled out a flashlight, old style, heavy metal, the kind they don't make anymore. He lit the trail ahead of us. At one point, I asked if I could take a photo to document the route for my own records. He said sure. I pulled out my phone, took a photo of Webb standing on the trail ahead of me. The flash lit him clearly, green uniform, campaign hat, calm expression. I checked the photo. It was clear, good composition. I put the phone away, kept walking. At 9:47 p.m., we reached a trailhead, not the one I'd started from, a different one, on the opposite side of the trail system. There was a small parking area. My car wasn't there, obviously, but there was a payphone. Old, probably hadn't worked in 20 years. Webb said, "You can call from here, get someone to pick you up, or I can walk you to the ranger station, it's about a mile down the road." "I'll call," I said. I pulled out my phone, still no service, but I could use the emergency function to reach 911. I turned to tell Webb. He was gone. I looked around the parking area, called his name. Webb? Ranger Webb? Nothing. I walked to the trailhead sign, looked down the trail we'd just exited. No light, no movement. He was just gone. I stood there for a moment, trying to process it, and then I called 911. A sheriff deputy arrived 30 minutes later. I explained what happened. The sheriff deputy drove me to the ranger station where I'd started that morning. My car was still there, safe. The duty ranger, a young woman named Layla Chen, took my statement. I described getting lost, described the ranger who found me, described how he'd walked me out. Layla was typing notes. She stopped. "The ranger who helped you, can you describe him?" I did. Older, gray hair, green uniform, campaign hat. Said his name was Webb. Layla's expression changed. "Wait here," she said. She came back 5 minutes later with a file. Opened it on the desk. "Is this the ranger who helped you?" she said. It was a photograph, black and white, clearly old. A ranger standing next to a trail marker. The same face I'd been walking behind for 2 hours. The same uniform. The same calm expression. "That's him," I said. Lila closed the file. "That's Ranger Silas Webb," she said. "He worked this district from 1947 to 1956. "Where is he now?" I asked. "I want to thank him properly." Lila looked at me. "He died in 1956, she said. "He was leading a search and rescue for 3 lost hikers. Found them, got them to safety, but he was caught in a flash flood on the way back. His body was recovered 2 days later." I stared at her. "That's impossible," I said. "I was just with him. He walked me 4 miles. He gave me water. He's real." Lila nodded. "I believe you," she said. "You are the 18th person to report being helped by Ranger Webb in the past 10 years. She pulled out another file, thicker. "We've been documenting this since 1957. The first sighting was 11 months after his death. A lost hiker found by a ranger who matched Webb's description. Led to safety. Ranger vanished at the trailhead. It's happened regularly since then." Lila showed me the reports. Dozens of them. All the same pattern. Hiker lost or injured in the Pisgah backcountry. A ranger appears. Older, gray hair, green uniform, campaign hat. Gives assistance. Guides to safety. Vanishes before being thanked. Every description matched Silas Webb. "Why doesn't the Park Service tell people about this?" I asked. Lila was quiet for a moment. "Because," she said carefully, "officially, ghosts don't exist. And if we acknowledge that one of our rangers is still working 68 years after his death, we open ourselves to legal liability, insurance complications, and a media circus that would damage the credibility of the entire Park Service." She closed the file. "So we document it internally. We note the pattern. We don't discourage it, but we don't publicize it." I asked Lila if I could see the photo I'd taken of Webb. She said yes. I pulled out my phone, opened the photo gallery, found the photo I'd taken on the trail. It showed the forest, the trail ahead, my flashlight beam illuminating the path, but no figure, no ranger, just empty trail. I've thought about that night every day for 3 years. About Silas Webb. About how real he felt. The weight of the water bottle he handed me. The sound of his voice. The way he moved through the forest with absolute confidence. He was as real as anything I've ever experienced. But the photo shows he wasn't there. At least not in a way that cameras can capture. I went back to Pisgah 6 months later, found the ranger station, asked if I could see Silas Webb's file. Lila showed me everything. Service record, incident reports, photos. Silas Webb joined the Forest Service in 1947 at age 34. He was described as exceptionally competent and dedicated to visitor safety. Over 9 years, he participated in 43 search and rescue operations, successful in all 43. On June 12, 1956, he responded to a report of 3 lost hikers on the Art Loeb Trail. Found them at dusk. All 3 were dehydrated. 1 had a sprained ankle. He gave them water, shared his food, walked them 6 miles to the nearest trailhead, got them to safety, started walking back to his station. A flash flood hit the creek he was crossing. He was swept downstream. His body was found 2 days later, 8 miles from where the flood occurred. He was 44 years old. The last entry in his file was a letter from one of the hikers he'd saved that day. It was dated June 20, 1956, 8 days after Webb died, before the hiker knew that Webb was dead. The letter said, "I want to thank Ranger Webb for saving our lives. He found us when we had given up hope. He gave us water when ours was gone. He walked us to safety when we couldn't have made it on our own. He is the finest example of what a ranger should be. I hope he receives the recognition he deserves." Silas Webb received a posthumous commendation from the Forest Service for the rescue. His name is on a plaque at the Pisgah Ranger Station. But the recognition he deserves, the real recognition, is not on any plaque. It's in the 68 years of continuing service, the 18 documented cases in the past 10 years alone, the dozens more that probably happened but were never reported. Silas Webb died doing what he loved, helping people who were lost, getting them to safety, and he's never stopped. I called the Pisgah Ranger Station last month, asked if there had been any new sightings. Lila told me yes, 2 in the past 6 months. Both the same pattern. Hiker lost or injured. Ranger appears, gives assistance, guides to safety, vanishes at the trailhead. Description matches Silas Webb. I asked Lila, "Does it bother you, having a ghost ranger still working your district?" She was quiet for a moment. "No," she said, "because he's not a ghost. Not in the way people think ghosts work. He's a ranger. He's doing his job. He just happens to be doing it from the other side of whatever line separates the living from the dead." I think Lila is right. Silas Webb isn't haunting Pisgah. He's working there, the same way he worked there from 1947 to 1956, helping people, finding the lost, getting them home. Death didn't end his service. It just changed the rules under which he operates. If you ever hike in the Pisgah National Forest, if you ever find yourself turned around, lost with night falling and water running low, don't panic. Because if you're in genuine danger, there's a ranger who still walks those trails. Older, gray hair, green uniform, campaign hat. He'll appear when you need him most. He'll give you water. He'll share his food. He'll walk you home. And when you reach safety, when you turn to thank him, he'll be gone. Not because he wants recognition, but because his job was getting you home safe. And once that's done, he has other hikers to find, other people who need help. Because Silas Webb made a promise 68 years ago, a promise that death couldn't break. I will get them home. And he keeps that promise every time, forever. My name is Fletcher Banks. In the fall of 1989, I was working as a park ranger in the Jefferson National Forest in Southwest Virginia. I'd been with the Forest Service for 6 years by then, long enough to know the difference between a normal day in the mountains and a day when something is wrong. October 14th, 1989 was the latter. The morning started quiet, too quiet. I was sitting at the ranger station near the Cascades trailhead, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm in my thermos. My partner that season was Diana Walsh, 26 years old and fresh out of Ranger Academy. She was still enthusiastic about every deer track and every mushroom she found. She was outside, reorganizing the information kiosk and humming something tuneless. I called out to her, "Keep singing like that and you'll scare off all the wildlife." She stuck her tongue out at me and said, "Jealousy doesn't suit you, Fletcher." I smiled despite myself. Around 8:15 a.m., we headed out to inspect the Northern Trail system. It was a standard maintenance check where we'd look for fallen trees, check trail markers, and make sure the overnight camping areas were clear. My right knee was acting up, an old football injury from high school that flared in cold weather. Diana walked ahead of me, her braids swinging with each step. The forest felt off. There was no squirrel chatter, no bird songs, just an oppressive stillness that made my shoulders tense. Our radios crackled occasionally, but no voices came through. That was unusual because by this time of morning, other rangers usually checked in, but today there was only silence. We found the first sign around 9:45 a.m. A deer carcass lay just off the trail, partially concealed by ferns. Its hind legs were twisted backward, and its belly had been torn open. Not cleanly, not like a predator kill, but like something had ripped it apart in a frenzy. Diana pressed her mouth to her hand and asked quietly, "Mountain lion?" We had panthers in the area, rare sightings, but they were documented. But this didn't look like a cat kill. Cats are surgical, they kill efficiently. This was carnage. The smell was overwhelming, decay mixed with something sweeter, something wrong. I poked the carcass with a stick while Diana looked away. She asked if we should call it in, and I said, "Let's finish the patrol first, see if there's anything else unusual." We continued up the trail, moving more slowly now, more carefully. By noon, we'd reached a designated camping zone called Timber Hollow. A family had reserved the spot for the weekend, and they should have been there. Instead, we found chaos. Shredded tent fabric was scattered across the clearing. A cooler was tipped over with its contents spilled and trampled, and sleeping bags were torn open. But there were no people, no blood. They were just gone. Diana called out, "Hello?" Her voice echoed through the trees, but there was no response. I tried the radio, but got only dense, unbroken static. "Signal's bad here," I said. "Let's move to higher ground." We climbed toward the overlook ridge, following a creek bed upstream. That's when we started seeing the other signs. Tree branches were broken at impossible heights, 10 or 12 feet up. There were claw marks on bark, deep parallel gouges that looked wrong, too wide and too deep. Diana stayed close to me now, her earlier enthusiasm replaced by tension. We reached the rental cabins around 1:30 p.m. There were 3 small structures tucked back among the pines. The first cabin's door hung open on broken hinges. Inside, we found overturned furniture, dark stains on the wooden floor, and a single hiking boot lying in the corner. I backed out quickly. The second cabin's door was closed, but the frame was gouged deeply with long scratches that went through the paint and into the wood beneath. I knocked and called out, "Anyone in there?" A weak voice answered, "Help, please." Diana and I forced the door open. A man sat slumped against the far wall, early 40s maybe. His shirt was shredded and his chest was covered in deep lacerations, still seeping blood. His skin had a gray pallor. I knelt beside him and asked, "What happened?" He struggled to breathe and said, "Something attacked us, my wife and I. We were sleeping. It came through the window. Big, fast, like a bear, but not a bear. Matted fur, long claws. My wife ran outside. I heard her screaming. Then, nothing." He grabbed my wrist and said, "Don't go out there alone. It's still here. I can feel it." Diana tried the radio again, but got nothing. I found a first aid kit and tried to bandage his wounds. He cried out in pain. "We need to get you out of here," I said. He nodded weakly. We helped him to his feet. He was light. Shock and blood loss had drained him. Diana and I supported him between us, his arms over our shoulders, and we started down the trail toward the main station. It was slow going. The man kept drifting in and out of consciousness, his head lolling forward. The forest around us remained unnaturally still. About half a mile down, I stumbled over an exposed root and nearly dropped him. Diana steadied me, her face tight with worry. Above us, a branch creaked. I looked up but couldn't see anything clearly through the dense canopy. Maybe a raccoon? Maybe not. We kept moving. We rounded a sharp bend in the trail, and it was there, blocking our path. It had dropped from the slope above, landing in a crouch directly ahead of us. The creature was powerfully built, with dark fur that was matted and filthy. Its face was elongated and wrong, like a wolverine's snout, but larger. Its eyes reflected the filtered sunlight, a yellow-green color. Its front paws were massive, tipped with curved claws dark with dried blood. It made no sound, just watched us with its head tilted slightly, calculating. Diana froze. The injured man started shaking. I took a slow step backward. The creature lowered its head and charged. I barely had time to let go of the injured man. He fell. The creature hit Diana with terrifying force, and she went down hard, started screaming. I fumbled for my utility knife, but my hands were numb and wouldn't cooperate. By the time I got it out, Diana had gone silent. The creature was on top of her. I stumbled backward with the knife shaking in my grip. It looked up at me, its muzzle wet with blood. Then it turned, grabbed Diana's body and dragged her into the underbrush. I wanted to follow, wanted to fight, but she was gone. And if I went after her, I'd be dead too. I backed away slowly and tripped over the injured man. He was still breathing, barely. "Don't leave me," he whispered. Before I could answer, I heard movement. It was coming back. I stood in front of him with my knife raised. The creature exploded from the trees and hit me so hard I lost my footing and went down. I swung wildly and connected once, felt the blade bite flesh. The creature jerked back, and that bought me a second. I tried to pull the injured man up, but he screamed in agony. The creature circled us. I knew I couldn't save him, couldn't drag him, couldn't win this fight. "I'm sorry," I said, and I ran. I ran downhill as branches tore at my face and arms. My boots slipped on wet leaves and I fell hard, skinned my palms, got up and kept running. I didn't stop until my lungs felt like they were on fire. Maybe a mile later, I hit a Forest Service road and saw the lights of the main station through the trees. I staggered forward with blurring vision, made it to the station, and used the working radio to call for backup. A rescue team arrived before midnight. We searched with high-powered lights and rifles, and found torn clothing, found blood, found Diana's equipment scattered across 100 yards of trail. But we found no body, no sign of the family from the campsite, and no tracks from whatever had killed them. The official report blamed a bear attack, possibly rabid. But I know what I saw. That thing was no bear. It moved differently, hunted differently, and it left no trace except the people it took. I transferred out 2 months later. I couldn't work those trails anymore, couldn't walk into the forest without seeing Diana's face, without hearing that injured man begging me not to leave him. I think about it constantly, what that creature was, where it came from, whether it's still out there. And I think about the families who hike those trails now, who camp in Timber Hollow, who have no idea that something inhuman lives in the deep forest, waiting. If you ever hike in the Jefferson National Forest, if you notice the birds have gone silent, if you see claw marks that don't match any known animal, leave immediately. Because some things in the Appalachian Mountains are older than our maps, older than our understanding, and some things still hunt the way they did before humans ever walked these ridges. Imagine you're a seasonal ranger assigned to a century-old cabin deep in the Appalachian Mountains. You find a grandfather clock that runs backwards, perfectly accurate. At midnight, it chimes in reverse, and each time it chimes, a figure appears in your cabin. A ranger who died here in 1923. And he wants you to burn with him. My name is Dalton Rivers. In the spring of 2024, I took a seasonal ranger position with the Chattahoochee National Forest in northern Georgia. I'd been working desk jobs for 5 years, sitting under fluorescent lights, answering emails, going home to an empty apartment. I needed a change, something physical, something real. The Forest Service posting said they needed someone for a remote station in the backcountry. 6 months, April through September, living alone in a historic ranger cabin built in 1898. No electricity, no running water, just kerosene lamps and a wood stove. It sounded perfect. I applied, got the job, and on April 3rd, I hiked 8 miles into the forest to reach what would be my home for the next half year, the Stillwater Station. The cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by oak and hickory, a small structure, maybe 400 square feet total, 1 room with a sleeping loft. Stone fireplace on 1 wall. The logs were dark with age, the chinking between them patched and repatched over more than a century. It looked exactly like what I'd wanted. Rustic, isolated, quiet. I spent the first 2 days cleaning and organizing, sweeping out mouse droppings, airing out musty blankets, checking the stove. The Forest Service had left supplies, canned food, medical kit, radio, fire extinguisher, tools, everything I'd need. On my 3rd night there, I found the clock. I'd been exploring the loft space above the main room, looking for storage. That's when I noticed a tarp in the corner, pulled it back, and there it was, a grandfather clock. Tall, maybe 7 feet, dark wood, almost black, ornate carvings on the case. The face was porcelain, yellowed with age, Roman numerals, 2 hands, hour and minute, and it was running, but backwards. The minute hand moved counterclockwise. The hour hand followed, slowly, steadily. I watched it for 5 minutes. The movement was smooth, perfectly mechanical, and somehow, despite running backwards, it showed the correct time. I checked my watch. 8:47 p.m. The clock showed 8:47, but the hands were moving in reverse. I climbed down from the loft and radioed the district office. "Hey, this is Rivers at Stillwater. Quick question. There's a grandfather clock here, really old. Is this something I should document?" The supervisor's voice crackled back. "A clock at Stillwater? That's odd. We don't have any inventory records for that. Can you describe it?" I did. She was quiet for a moment. "Leave it alone for now. I'll check the historical records. Stillwater's been decommissioned and recommissioned a few times. Might be something left from an old ranger. But if it's working, don't mess with it. Could be an antique." "Copy that," I said. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. A clock running backwards. Perfectly. For how long? Who wound it last? Why was it hidden under a tarp? At 11:58 p.m., I was lying in my sleeping bag, reading by lantern light. The cabin was quiet, just the occasional pop from the cooling stove. Then I heard it. From the loft above me, a mechanical whirring. The clock was preparing to chime. I sat up, listened. At exactly midnight, the chimes began, but they rang backwards, each note descending instead of ascending, a discordant falling melody that made my teeth hurt. 12 chimes, each one wrong, and as the last chime faded, the temperature dropped. Not gradually, instantly. My breath misted in the air, and I saw something, a flicker, at the edge of the lantern light, the outline of a figure standing near the door. I grabbed my flashlight, turned it on. Nothing there, but the cold remained for maybe 30 seconds, and then it was gone. The cabin warmed, and I was alone again. The next morning, I radioed the district office again, told them what happened. The supervisor sounded skeptical, but not dismissive. "Stillwater has a history," she said. "What kind of history?" I asked. "Fire, 1923. The ranger stationed there, man named Augustus Finch, died in a cabin fire. They rebuilt on the same foundation a few years later, but some of the old rangers said the place felt wrong after that. That's part of why it keeps getting decommissioned." "What about the clock?" I asked. "I'll look into it. In the meantime, if it bothers you, just cover it back up, but don't break it. If it's from 1923 or earlier, it could be valuable." I said I'd leave it alone, but I didn't cover it. I wanted to understand it. The second night, the chimes came again at midnight, 12 backwards tones, and this time the figure was clearer. A man standing by the fireplace, wearing an old ranger uniform,
the kind from the 1920s, different cut, different style. He was looking at me. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. And then he was gone. I sat up for the rest of the night, lantern burning, watching the shadows, but nothing else happened. By the third night, I'd decided to document everything. I set up my phone to record video, aimed it at the fireplace where I'd seen the figure. At 11:59 p.m., I started recording. The backwards chimes came, and this time the figure didn't just appear, it moved, walked from the fireplace toward the loft ladder. I could see it clearly on my phone screen, translucent, but definitely there. It climbed the ladder, stood in front of the clock, and raised one hand and touched the glass face. And then it turned, looked directly at me, mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, but I could read his lips. Join me. And then he was gone. I watched the video 20 times the next morning. The figure was there, clear, undeniable. I sent the video to the district office with a message. I need someone to come out here. This isn't normal. The response came 3 hours later. Rivers, I've reviewed the video. I'm escalating this to our cultural resources team. In the meantime, I'm authorizing you to temporarily relocate to the visitor center if you don't feel safe. But I need you to understand, Stillwater is remote. Getting a team out there will take at least a week. I thought about leaving, but something stopped me. I wanted answers. I wanted to know what Augustus Finch wanted, and why the clock kept bringing him back.
That night, I didn't wait for midnight. At 11:45 p.m., I climbed into the loft, stood in front of the clock, studied it. The backwards motion was hypnotic. The hands moved smoothly, no ticking sound, just silent reverse progression. I opened the glass face, looked at the mechanism inside. Everything was normal, standard grandfather clock workings, except for one thing. The pendulum was swinging the wrong direction, not left-right, but somehow inverted, as though gravity itself was reversed inside the clock. I closed the glass, stepped back, and that's when I heard it. A voice from behind me. You shouldn't touch that. I spun around. Augustus Finch was standing at the top of the loft ladder, solid this time, not translucent, as real as I was. His ranger uniform was scorched, burnt at the edges. His face was gaunt. His eyes were dark pits. You shouldn't be here, I said. He smiled, not friendly, hungry. I've been here longer than you've been alive. This station is mine, and every 7 years someone comes, and the clock brings me back so I can finish what was interrupted. What are you talking about? I said. His smile widened. In 1923, I shared this station with another ranger, younger than me, better than me, promoted over me. I couldn't stand it, so one night while he slept, I set the fire. But he woke up. We fought, and we both died. He took a step toward me, but the clock remembers. It runs backwards because time here never moved forward after that night. And every 7 years, when someone new comes, I get another chance to finish what I started. I backed toward the ladder. You want to kill me? I want to complete the cycle,
he said. "The fire, the death, the way it was supposed to end. You're not supposed to fight. You're supposed to burn." He lunged. I dodged, grabbed the clock, pulled it toward me. It was heavier than it looked, but I managed to lift it. Augustus screamed, not with his voice, with something deeper, a sound that vibrated through the cabin walls. "Don't!" he shouted. "If you break the clock, you break the cycle." "Good," I said, and I threw it. The clock tumbled down from the loft, crashed onto the floor below. The case splintered, the glass face shattered, the internal mechanism burst apart, gears and springs scattered across the floor, and Augustus Finch began to scream. He was fading, flickering, like a candle flame in strong wind. "You don't understand," he shouted. "The clock was the only thing keeping me here. Without it—" He vanished mid-sentence. Just gone.
The cabin was silent. I climbed down the ladder, stood among the wreckage of the grandfather clock. The pieces were old, ancient. The wood was dry, the metal corroded. This clock had been running for over 100 years, backwards, perfectly. And now it was broken. I swept up the pieces, put them in a bag, carried them outside, buried them in the forest, far from the cabin. And when I came back inside, the cabin felt different, colder, not temperature cold, something else. The walls looked darker, as though they'd been scorched. I checked, ran my hand along the logs. They were charred, faintly, as though the fire from 1923 had just been revealed. I left Stillwater Station the next morning, hiked the 8 miles back to the district office, told them I was done. The supervisor didn't argue. "We'll find someone else for the season," she said. "Was it the ghost?" she asked. "There's no ghost anymore," I said. "I broke the clock." She nodded slowly. "Then maybe Stillwater can finally rest." I went home, back to my apartment, back to my desk job. But 3 days later, I was unpacking my gear, and I found something in my jacket pocket. A small piece of the clock, a single gear, about the size of a quarter. And it was moving, rotating, slowly, backwards. I stared at it for a long time, tried to crush it, couldn't, tried to throw it away, but every time I did, it reappeared in my pocket the next morning. I still have it, right now, in my pocket. A tiny piece of the clock that wouldn't die, still ticking, still running backwards. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in my apartment, I hear it, a faint mechanical whirring, and I feel the temperature drop, and I know that Augustus Finch isn't gone. He's just waiting, in the piece of the clock I carry with me, waiting for the moment when the cycle can begin again. If you ever take a job as a seasonal ranger in a remote Appalachian station, if you find a clock that runs backwards, if you see a figure at midnight, don't try to understand it. Don't try to fix it. And whatever you do, don't break the clock. Because breaking it doesn't end the cycle. It just makes you part of it. My name is Wade Cunningham, and I've been a wildfire response ranger in the Appalachian Mountains for 19 years. I've fought fires that consumed thousands of acres, coordinated evacuations of entire towns, watched forests I loved reduced to charcoal and ash. But I've never seen anything like what happened at Blackthorn Ridge. The fire that burned without burning, the dead who died without dying, the reality that folded in on itself and left behind only ghosts and questions, and the glass bottle that saved my life and might be slowly killing me. It started on July 23rd, during the worst drought the region had seen in 40 years. Temperatures above 95 for 3 straight weeks, humidity below 20%. Forest Service had declared extreme fire danger across the entire Appalachian Range. I was coordinating operations from the Mount Mitchell Ranger Station when the call came in at 2:17 p.m. "We have a confirmed wildfire, Blackthorn Ridge sector. Multiple spotters reporting heavy smoke, estimated 50 acres and spreading fast." I grabbed my gear. "How many spotters?" 3 independent reports: fire lookout tower, commercial aircraft, and a hiking party on the Northern Trail. 3 separate confirmations. That was serious. I radioed for helicopter support and assembled a rapid response team. 6 experienced firefighters, all of them people I'd trust with my life. We were airborne by 2:45 p.m., heading toward Blackthorn Ridge with full suppression equipment. From the air, we could see the smoke, massive plume, dark and thick, rising from the ridge like a funeral pyre. The kind of smoke that meant active combustion, heavy fuel load, dangerous conditions. "Jesus," said my co-pilot, a veteran named Christine Vega. "That's going to be a bad one. Look at that column development." She was right. The smoke was behaving exactly like a major wildfire, rising in a thick column, then spreading into a mushroom shape at higher altitude where it hit temperature inversion. But something was wrong. The color was off. Normal wildfire smoke ranges from white to dark gray, depending on what's burning and how hot the fire is. This smoke was perfectly uniform, a flat, lifeless gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "You seeing that color?" I asked Christine. "Yeah, weird. Maybe it's burning something unusual? Old structure? Chemical storage?" "Nothing on the maps. Blackthorn Ridge is pristine wilderness, has been for 200 years. We circled lower, preparing for landing in the designated drop zone half a mile from the reported fire location. That's when I noticed the second thing that was wrong. There was no heat shimmer. Major wildfires create massive thermal updrafts. You can see them from miles away. Distortions in the air, heat waves rising, the atmosphere itself warping from the temperature. Helicopter pilots have to be careful because the thermals can cause dangerous turbulence. But there was nothing. The air below us was perfectly stable. No shimmer, no distortion, no thermals. "Christine, you reading any temperature anomalies?" She checked her instruments. "Negative. Ambient temperature is 72 degrees at ground level. That can't be right. Run it again." She did. Same reading. 72 degrees, about 15 degrees cooler than it should have been on a July afternoon, and impossible if there was an active fire below. "Equipment malfunction?" she suggested. "Maybe, but I'm not liking this. Let's set down at the drop zone. We'll assess on foot." We landed in a clearing half a mile north of the reported fire location. The moment I stepped out of the helicopter, I knew something was catastrophically wrong. The air was cold. Not cool, cold. Maybe 60 degrees, with a damp chill that raised goosebumps on my arms. In July, in the middle of a drought, in what was supposed to be the center of a major wildfire. And there was ash everywhere, coating the trees, the ground, even drifting through the air like snow. Fine gray ash that settled on everything and turned the world monochrome. But the trees were intact, not burned, not even scorched, just covered in ash, like someone had dusted them with powder. Wade, one of my team members, a young ranger named Trevor Lake, pointed to the smoke column. "It's not moving." He was right. The massive plume we'd seen from the air was frozen in place, not drifting with wind, not dissipating, just hanging there like a 3-dimensional photograph, perfectly still. "Everyone stay close," I ordered. "Something's wrong here. Trevor, try the radio. Let dispatch know our situation."
Trevor keyed his radio. Nothing but static. He tried different frequencies. Same result. No comms, dead on all channels. Christine was staring at the frozen smoke column. This isn't possible. Smoke just doesn't stop. It's particulate matter in fluid motion. It can't freeze like that. Well, it did. I pulled out my thermal camera and scanned the area. No heat signatures, not from the smoke, not from any burning material. The entire forest registered at the same temperature, a uniform 60 degrees. We started moving toward the reported fire center, following GPS coordinates. The ash got thicker with every step. Soon we were wading through it, our boots sinking into drifts 6 inches deep. But still, no fire, no burning, just ash and cold, and that frozen smoke hanging in the air like a monument to combustion that never happened.
We reached what should have been the fire's point of origin at 3:47 p.m. The forest there was dead. Not burned, dead. The trees were still standing, but they were gray, colorless, drained of life in a way that had nothing to do with fire. Their bark was intact, but cold to the touch. Their branches were perfectly preserved, but fragile, crumbling to powder if you touched them too hard. And everywhere, there was ash. Thick blankets of it, sometimes waist-deep, covering the ground and piled against trees and filling every depression in the terrain. "This doesn't make sense," Christine said quietly. "Where did all this ash come from? There's enough here to account for hundreds of acres of forest, but the trees are still standing." I didn't have an answer. Trevor was examining one of the trees, scraping ash away from the bark. "Wait, look at this." I moved closer. Under the ash, the tree bark was marked, carved. Deep grooves forming symbols I didn't recognize. Not natural damage, deliberate carving. And the symbols were warm. While everything else was cold, these marks radiated heat. Not fire hot, body heat, like something alive had touched them recently. "Everyone mark these trees," I ordered. "If there are more symbols, I want to know." We spread out, examining the gray forest. Within minutes, we'd found dozens of marked trees, all with the same symbols, all warm to the touch, and all arranged in a pattern, a rough circle about 200 yards in diameter, with the frozen smoke column at its center. "It's like a boundary," Christine said quietly. "A perimeter, marking something." "Marking what?" She pointed toward the center. "Whatever's in there." I should have called for extraction then, should have recognized that we were dealing with something beyond normal fire response, but 19 years of training and experience told me to investigate, to understand, to assess the threat before retreating. So, we moved toward the center. The ash got deeper, the cold got worse, and the silence became absolute. No birds, no insects, no wind, just our footsteps crunching through ash and our breathing ragged in the thin, dead air. Then we started seeing them. Figures, human-shaped, moving through the gray forest like smoke given form. They were translucent, barely visible, their edges bleeding into the ash-heavy air. "You seeing that?" Trevor whispered. "Yeah. Everyone stay calm, stay together." The figures didn't approach us. They just wandered, drifting through the trees with purposeless motion, occasionally reaching out to touch a trunk or bending down to examine the ash-covered ground. As we got closer, I could see more detail. They weren't fully human. Their features were indistinct, blurred, like looking at someone through frosted glass. But I could see enough to make out clothing, old-fashioned, from different eras. Some wore what looked like colonial-era dress. Others had clothes from the early 1900s. A few wore more modern attire, jeans, t-shirts, hiking boots. "Are those ghosts?" Christine asked. "I don't know what they are,
But they haven't noticed us yet. Let's keep it that way. We continued forward, weaving between the smoke-like figures. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all wandering aimlessly through the dead forest, all trapped in this strange, cold place where a fire had burned without burning. At the center of the circle, where the frozen smoke column touched the ground, we found what looked like a campfire site. Or rather, what should have been a campfire site. There was a ring of stones, clearly arranged by human hands. In the center was ash and charred wood, normal fire debris, still warm. But the warmth was wrong. It wasn't the clean heat of a campfire. It was greasy, thick, oppressive, like the heat that comes off a fever patient. And around the fire ring, carved into every stone, were more of those symbols. "Someone made this," Trevor said quietly. "Someone lit a fire here, and somehow it caused all of this." I knelt down to examine the fire ring more closely. The ash inside was different from the ash coating everything else. This ash had structure. When I looked closely, I could see shapes, fragments that might have been wood or paper or cloth, things that actually burned, actually been consumed by flame. Then I saw the photographs. Half burned, curling at the edges, but still recognizable. Black and white photos of people, families, groups, all standing in front of the same location, this exact spot, this exact clearing, though the trees around them looked healthier, more alive. The dates on the back of the photos ranged from 1887 to 2019. Over 100 years of photos, all from this location, all showing different people, all burned in the same fire. "Christine, look at this." She examined the photos, her face paling. "This doesn't make sense. These photos span more than a century. They can't all have been burned at the same time. Unless time works differently here." One of my team members, a veteran firefighter named Russell Banks, called out from 20 yards away. "Wade, you need to see this." We found him standing at the edge of a depression in the ground. When I looked down, I understood why he'd called us. There were more photos, hundreds of them, thousands, all partially burned, all showing people at this location, all spanning more than a century of history. And among the photos were other things, personal items, a pocket watch, a wedding ring, children's toys, all partially burned, all from different eras. It's like every fire that ever happened in this spot all happened at once. All the burns, all the victims, all the objects, they're all here, all mixed together, all mixed together. Victims. I grabbed one of the photos, examined it closely. The people in the photo were smiling, happy. It was a family picnic scene from maybe the 1920s. But when I looked closer, I could see something else in the image. Behind the family, barely visible in the trees, there were shapes, smoke-like figures, watching. I pulled out more photos. Same thing. Different eras, different people, but always those figures in the background, always watching. "They're not ghosts," I said slowly. "They're echoes. People who died in fires that happened in this spot over the last 100+ years, but not in our reality, in alternate realities, adjacent timelines. And somehow this spot, this exact location, is where all those realities intersect." "That's insane," Trevor said. "You got a better explanation for why we're standing in a fire site that isn't burning?"
That's when the smoke-like figures started noticing us. One of them, a woman in clothing from the 1940s, turned and looked directly at me. Her face came into focus for just a moment, and I saw recognition, surprise, joy. She started moving toward me, not threatening, eager, like she'd been waiting for someone to see her. Others followed. Within seconds, dozens of the figures were converging on our position. "Back up," I ordered. "Slowly. Don't run." But as we retreated, more figures appeared, surrounding us, cutting off our exit routes. Their features were becoming clearer, more distinct, like they were solidifying just from our attention. And they were trying to touch us. Smoke-like hands reaching out, fingers extending toward my face, my arms, my chest. Each touch was cold, not like ice, but like absence, like feeling the shape of missing warmth. "Wait, what do we do?" Christine's voice was shaking. I didn't know. My training covered wildfire suppression, evacuation procedures, emergency medical response. Nothing in my 19 years had prepared me for being surrounded by the ghosts of people who died in fires that never happened in our timeline. Then I remembered something my grandfather had told me. He'd been a ranger too, working these mountains in the 1960s. He'd told stories about thin places, locations where reality was unstable, where different possibilities could overlap. He'd said that if you ever found yourself in a thin place, you needed an anchor, something solid, something undeniably real and from your own timeline, something to remind you which reality you belonged to. I looked around desperately. The entire forest was contaminated with ash and echoes. Everything was tainted by the overlapping realities. Then I saw it. Near the edge of the depression, half buried in ash, something was glinting. Glass, catching the flat gray light. I scrambled toward it, smoke figures reaching for me, cold touches making my skin numb. I grabbed the glass object and pulled it free. A bottle, modern, plastic cap still intact. A water bottle, one of the disposable kind hikers carry. The label was faded but readable, a brand that had only been founded in 2015, 9 years ago. This bottle was real, from my timeline, undeniably solid, undeniably modern. I gripped it tight, focusing on it, the texture of the plastic, the weight, the way light refracted through the clear material, the specific shade of blue in the label. This was real. This was my reality. This bottle existed in a world where fires burned normally, where smoke moved with wind, where the dead stayed dead. The smoke figures recoiled, their faces twisted in what might have been frustration or sorrow. "Everyone, grab something modern, something that can't exist in their timelines. Focus on it." My teen scrambled, searching through the ash. Trevor found a candy wrapper, dated 2023. Christine found a disposable face mask, impossible before 2020. Russell found a smartphone case, cracked but unmistakable. As each person found their anchor and focused on it, the smoke figures backed away, frustrated, defeated. The forest around us started to shift. The ash became less substantial. The gray trees showed hints of color. The frozen smoke column began to move, just barely, starting to dissipate in a wind we suddenly realized had always been there. "Move," I ordered. "Back to the helicopter. Don't let go of your anchors." We ran, clutching our modern objects like talismans, the smoke figures pursuing, but unable to touch us. The forest was phasing back to normal, the ash fading, the cold lifting, the oppressive silence breaking up. We reached the helicopter at 5:23 p.m. The moment we crossed the boundary marked by those carved symbols, reality snapped back completely. The ash vanished, the figures disappeared. The forest was normal, hot, humid,
alive with summer sounds. Behind us, the frozen smoke column collapsed, dissolving into normal, dissipating smoke that drifted away on a sudden breeze. "What the hell just happened?" Christine demanded. "I don't know, but we're reporting this as a false alarm. Weather inversion creating an optical illusion. No fire, no danger. Area is clear." "Wade, we can't." "Yes, we can, and we will. Because if we report what we actually saw, we'll spend the rest of our careers in psychiatric evaluation. And that place, whatever it is, needs to be left alone. Not studied, not investigated, just avoided."
We filed the false alarm report, blamed unusual atmospheric conditions for the smoke sighting, attributed the cold temperature readings to equipment malfunction, made no mention of ash or figures or realities folding in on themselves. The incident was closed within a week, but I kept the bottle. I carry it everywhere now, in my pack when I'm on duty, in my jacket when I'm off. I sleep with it on my nightstand, because sometimes, late at night, I start to smell smoke. And when I do, I need something to remind me which reality I'm in. The bottle is always warm to the touch. Not hot, just warm. Body temperature. Like it's alive somehow, or like it's working hard to keep me anchored. My team doesn't talk about what happened. We have an unspoken agreement to pretend it was exactly what the report says. An optical illusion, a mistake, nothing more. But I've noticed things, small things. Trevor resigned 3 months after the incident, said he couldn't fight fires anymore, that every time he saw smoke, he saw faces in it. Christine transferred to a desk job, coordinates operations from a computer now, won't go into the field. Russell still works fires, but I've seen him checking his smartphone case obsessively, making sure it's still there, still solid, still real. And me? I smell smoke constantly. Not real smoke, the other kind, the cold, gray, lifeless smoke from that dead forest where fires burn in adjacent realities. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I see them, the smoke figures, just at the edge of my vision, always watching, always waiting, like they're hoping I'll forget which reality I'm in, hoping I'll let go of my anchor. The bottle gets warmer when they're close, a warning system, a lifeline. I've done research, against my better judgment, looking into the history of Blackthorn Ridge, trying to understand what we encountered. The location has a history, a bad one. In 1887, a homesteader's cabin burned there, family of 4 killed. In 1923, a forest fire swept through, 3 hikers died. In 1956, a camp group was caught in a wildfire, 6 children and 2 counselors dead. In 1989, a lightning strike started a blaze. 2 firefighters died in the suppression effort. In 2019, a hiker was found dead at that location. Cause of death, smoke inhalation. But there was no fire, no source of smoke, just a perfectly healthy forest and 1 dead man who'd breathed smoke from nowhere. The spot is cursed, or broken, or both. A place where the barriers between timelines are thin enough that fires from different realities can bleed through, where the dead from multiple timelines accumulate like sediment, where smoke that burned 100 years ago or 10 years from now can exist simultaneously with smoke that's burning right now. A junction point, an anchor point, a place where reality overlaps itself until the overlapping becomes visible. Last week, dispatch got a call, smoke sighting at Blackthorn Ridge, multiple reports, heavy column, possible major fire. They asked me to respond. Standard procedure, I'm the senior ranger for that sector. I told them no. First time in 19 years I've refused an assignment. My supervisor demanded an explanation. That location is compromised, I said. Compromised how? Unstable terrain. Previous false alarm investigation revealed geological instability. We need to reclassify the area as too dangerous for ground operations, air support and surveillance only. Wade, you're not making sense. The ground is solid. We've had crews there dozens of times. Not at the center, not where the reports are coming from. That specific 200-yard circle is unstable. I've documented it. Check my incident report from July. He did. Found my false alarm report. Nothing in it about geological instability. I'd been too focused on covering up what we actually found to prevent future responses. Wade, there's nothing in this report about unstable terrain. Then I'm filing an amendment. That area is dangerous. We need to keep people out. You're acting strange. Is there something you're not telling me? Yes. I'm not telling you that we found a place where dead people from different timelines accumulate like ashes, where fires that never happened in our reality still leave victims, where reality itself is damaged. No, I said. I'm just being cautious, following my instincts. My instincts say stay away from Blackthorn Ridge. He stared at me for a long time. Then, fine, I'll send another team. You're off rotation for that sector until further notice.
They sent Christine's replacement, a young ranger named Maria Ortega, enthusiastic, experienced, confident. She took a team to Blackthorn Ridge yesterday, reported massive smoke column, frozen in place, temperature readings of 60 degrees, ash everywhere. She reported exactly what we found, down to the smoke figures and the overlapping realities. Then her radio went dead, standard communication loss in that area. When her team didn't return by nightfall, we sent a search party. They found the helicopter, empty, equipment still there, no sign of the crew. At the location itself, they found 6 modern objects arranged in a circle: a smartphone, a smartwatch, a protein bar wrapper, a COVID mask, a vape pen, a hair tie with a 2023 copyright mark. Maria's anchor, her team's anchors, dropped or taken. The crew is still missing. The search has been expanded to 100 square miles, but I know where they are. They're in that gray forest, in the reality that exists adjacent to ours. The reality where all those fires happened, where all those victims died, where Maria and her team are now just more smoke figures wandering endlessly through ash-covered trees, waiting for someone from their timeline to see them, waiting for someone to anchor them back to reality. I'm writing this as a warning, an unofficial addendum to my official reports, because the official reports are lies, necessary lies, but lies nonetheless. Blackthorn Ridge is not safe. It's not just an area with bad wildfire history. It's a junction point where multiple realities overlap, where fires from different timelines burn simultaneously, where the dead accumulate. And it's getting worse. More people disappear there every year, more smoke figures wandering that gray forest, more ash building up from fires that burned in realities adjacent to ours. Eventually, that overlap will become permanent. The boundaries will fail completely, and everyone who enters that area will step into a reality where they've been dead for years, killed by a fire that never happened in our timeline, but burned them nonetheless. If you're a ranger reading this, if you're assigned to respond to fires at Blackthorn Ridge, refuse. Say the equipment is malfunctioning, say the weather is too dangerous, say anything, but don't go there. And if you do go, if you have no choice, take something modern with you, something that can only exist in your timeline. Grip it tight, focus on it, don't let go. It might save you. It saved me. But I don't think it can save me forever, because the bottle is getting warmer and the smoke smell is getting stronger. And sometimes when I look in the mirror, my reflection is just a little bit translucent, just a little bit smoke-like. I think part of me is still in that gray forest, the part that saw those smoke figures and understood that I could become one, that recognized the cold and the ash and the timeless burning as something I might already belong to. I'm anchored to this reality by a plastic bottle, but anchors can slip, ropes can fray, and realities can overlap until you're not sure which one you're standing in anymore. The bottle is warm in my pocket right now, uncomfortably warm. I smell smoke, and when I close my eyes, I see a forest, gray, cold, covered in ash. A forest where a fire is always burning, where the dead are always dying, where smoke figures wander endlessly searching for someone from their timeline to see them, to anchor them, to bring them home. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. The bottle is so warm now. The smoke is so thick. I have to go back. The team is still there, Maria and her crew. I can hear them on the radio. Not the normal radio, the other one. The one that picks up transmissions from adjacent realities. They're calling for help. They've been calling for months, asking why we abandoned them, why we haven't come to bring them home. I'm taking the bottle, my anchor. I'll find them. I'll bring them back. If anyone finds this, tell them I tried. Tell them the bottle wasn't enough. Tell them reality is thinner than we think, and some fires burn in more places than we can see. The smoke is everywhere now. I can barely see the paper I'm writing on, but that's okay. Where I'm going, I won't need to see. I just need to follow the smoke. Wade Cunningham, Senior Ranger, Appalachian Wildfire Response. The fire didn't burn, but it still consumed us. All of us. And I'm so tired.
August in the Cascade foothills is supposed to be dry. The Meriwether River, which runs alongside Route 47 for 12 miles before disappearing into the backcountry, usually drops to a trickle this time of year. Exposed rocks, dry gravel beds, water so low you can walk across without getting your boots wet. That's why I wasn't worried when I started my patrol that Tuesday morning. My name is Marcus Webb. I've been a ranger with the state parks system for 9 years, and the Meriwether River Trail is my responsibility. It's a beautiful stretch of wilderness, popular for day hikers and fishermen, mostly peaceful except for the occasional littering problem or lost dog. The trail follows the river for 8 miles, starting at the main access road and ending at Cathedral Falls, a modest 20-foot waterfall that's more scenic than impressive. During dry season, I patrol it twice a week, checking for trail damage, clearing debris, making sure the emergency call boxes are functional. It was 94 degrees that morning. I'd started early to avoid the worst of the heat, beginning my hike at 6 a.m. The air was still and heavy, the kind of oppressive silence that comes before a hot day. Even the birds seemed subdued. The river was exactly where I expected it to be. Low, sluggish, barely moving between the exposed boulders. I made good time on the trail, stopping every half mile to check the markers and photograph any maintenance issues for my report. By 8 a.m., I was 4 miles in, halfway to Cathedral Falls. That's when I saw her. She was standing on the opposite bank, maybe 30 yards downstream from where I'd stopped to drink some water. Just standing there, perfectly still. At first, I thought she was a hiker who'd gotten separated from her group. I raised my hand to wave, opening my mouth to call out and ask if she needed help. Then I got a better look at her. She was soaking wet. Her long, dark hair hung in dripping strands around her face. Her clothes, a white dress that looked old-fashioned somehow, clung to her body, water streaming from the hem in steady rivulets. But the river behind her was bone dry. I felt my hand freeze in mid-wave,
My greeting died in my throat. The woman didn't move, didn't acknowledge me, just stood there, staring straight ahead at nothing, water pouring off her like she'd just climbed out of a swimming pool. "Miss, are you okay? Do you need assistance?" No response. She didn't even blink. I started moving toward her, planning to cross the river and check on her condition. Maybe she was in shock. Maybe she'd had some kind of accident upstream where the water was deeper. But when I looked down to navigate the rocks, looking for safe footing across the nearly dry riverbed, I heard it. A sound like distant thunder. I looked upstream and my blood went cold. Water was coming, a wall of it, dark and churning, rushing down the riverbed with impossible speed. It wasn't a normal flood. There was no gradual rise, no warning. 1 second, the river was a trickle. The next, a wall of water 3 feet high was bearing down on me.
I ran. I made it to higher ground just as the water hit, climbing onto a boulder cluster 15 feet above the normal waterline. The surge roared past below me, violent and muddy, carrying branches and debris that hadn't been there moments before. It made no sense. We were in the middle of a drought. There hadn't been rain in 6 weeks. The weather forecast showed clear skies for the next 10 days. Where was this water coming from? I looked back toward where the woman had been standing. She was gone. The opposite bank was empty, the space where she'd stood now underwater, completely submerged by the impossible flood. I waited on my boulder for 20 minutes, watching the water rage below me. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it began to recede. The level dropped rapidly, unnaturally fast, the river shrinking back to its previous trickle as if the flood had never happened. Within 30 minutes, the riverbed was dry again. I stood there, shaking, trying to make sense of what I just witnessed. Flash floods were possible, technically, but not like this. Not without rain. Not with this kind of sudden onset and equally sudden retreat. And not with a dripping wet woman appearing and disappearing like a ghost. I radioed base. "This is Webb on the Meriwether Trail. I just witnessed an unusual water surge near mile marker 4, requesting hydrological data on upstream conditions." The response came back 5 minutes later. "No unusual activity reported, Webb. Reservoir levels are normal. No dam releases scheduled. Are you sure about what you saw?" I looked at the muddy waterline on the rocks, still wet, already drying in the August heat. "Confirmed," I said. "I'll file a full report when I return." I didn't mention the woman. I didn't know how.
I cut my patrol short and headed back to the ranger station. Something was very wrong with the river, and I needed to understand what before someone got hurt. The first thing I did was check the geological surveys. The Meriwether River is fed by snowmelt from Mount Jefferson, channeled through a series of natural aquifers and underground streams. During dry season, the flow is predictable and stable. There's no mechanism for sudden floods without precipitation. Yet I'd seen one with my own eyes. Next, I reviewed incident reports. The Meriwether Trail had been open to the public for 63 years, and in that time, there had been surprisingly few accidents. A handful of twisted ankles, one bear encounter in 1987, a few cases of heat exhaustion. But there were 3 drownings. 1962, a woman named Sarah Whitmore, age 24, drowned while hiking alone. Her body was found near Cathedral Falls. 1979, a man named David Chen, age 31, drowned near mile marker 4. Witnesses reported the water level rose suddenly. 1998, a teenage girl named Rebecca Mills, age 16, drowned near the same location, also described as a sudden water surge. I felt my skin prickle. Mile marker 4. That's exactly where I'd seen the woman, where I'd nearly been caught by the flood. I dug deeper into the 1962 case.
Sarah Whitmore had been a local school teacher, well-liked, engaged to be married. She'd been hiking on a Sunday morning in July and never came home. Search parties found her body 3 days later, caught in the rocks near the falls. The official cause of death was accidental drowning, though the coroner had noted the water levels were unusually low that week, making it unclear how she drowned. There was a photograph in the file. Black and white, slightly blurred but clear enough. Sarah Whitmore had long dark hair and a heart-shaped face. She was wearing a white summer dress. My hands started shaking as I held the photograph. It was her. The woman I'd seen on the riverbank was Sarah Whitmore, dead for 62 years. I knew how this sounded. I knew what anyone would say if I reported this. I'd be sent for psychiatric evaluation, maybe put on leave. You don't stay employed as a ranger by claiming you've seen ghosts. But the evidence was undeniable. 3 drownings across 6 decades, all at the same location, all involving sudden water surges that shouldn't be possible. And Sarah Whitmore was the first. I spent the rest of the day researching her life. Local newspaper archives from 1962 painted a tragic picture. She'd been planning her wedding, set for August 15th. She'd been excited about her teaching position at Jefferson Elementary. She had family in the area, friends, a fiancé named Robert Mills who'd been devastated by her death. Wait, Mills. I checked the 1998 drowning report again. Rebecca Mills, age 16. I pulled up the genealogical records. Rebecca Mills was Sarah Whitmore's great-niece, granddaughter of Sarah's younger brother. The connection made my stomach turn. This wasn't random. The river, or whatever controlled it, was targeting Sarah's family. I needed to understand why she drowned in the first place. The circumstances had always been unclear. Sarah was a strong swimmer, familiar with the trail. The water levels were low. Nothing about her death made sense, unless it wasn't an accident. I found the answer in a journal article from a local historian, published in 1985. It was a footnote, barely 2 paragraphs, but it changed everything. In 1961, a small cemetery on the banks of the Meriwether River had been relocated to make way for the trail system. 27 graves were exhumed and moved to the county cemetery. The process had been rushed and poorly documented. Some graves were missed. Sarah Whitmore's drowning occurred less than a year after the trail opened. She hadn't drowned by accident. She drowned because someone had desecrated the ground she was now bound to protect. Or haunt.
I drove to the county clerk's office the next morning. If graves had been relocated, there would be records, maps, documentation of which plots had been moved and where they'd been reinterred. The clerk, a woman in her 60s named Donna, looked at me skeptically when I explained what I needed. The old Riverside Cemetery? That was 60-some years ago. Most of those records are in storage. I need to see them, I said. It's related to an ongoing safety investigation. She sighed, but led me to a basement archive room stacked with file boxes. Good luck, she said. Nobody's looked at this stuff in decades. It took me 4 hours to find what I needed. The relocation had been handled by a company called Cascade Memorial Services, contracted by the state. They'd mapped the cemetery, exhumed 27 graves, and transported them to new plots at Greenwood County Cemetery. But the original cemetery had held 32 graves. 5 were unaccounted for. The maps showed their approximate locations marked with question marks and notes like stone missing or plot unverified. The state had bulldozed the area anyway, paved over the remaining graves, and built the trail directly on top of them. One of those unmarked graves was located at what would become mile marker 4. I drove out to the trail that afternoon, parking at the access point and hiking directly to the location. I knew what I'd find before I got there. The trail at mile marker 4 ran along a slight elevation, a raised bed of gravel and packed dirt that followed the river's curve.
The area had been extensively modified during construction, flattened, reinforced, paved with a layer of asphalt that had been covered over with gravel for a more natural appearance. I stood there, looking at the ground, imagining what lay beneath. A casket, bones, the remains of someone who'd been buried with love and care, then abandoned when the cemetery was relocated. Someone the state had literally paved over. "I'm sorry," I said aloud, feeling foolish but compelled to speak. "I'm sorry this happened to you." The river behind me was silent, still, the water level exactly where it should be for this time of year. But I could feel her, a presence, watching, waiting.
I pulled out my phone and called the county historian, a retired professor named Dr. Ellen Kaczynski, who'd written extensively about local history. "Dr. Kaczynski, this is Marcus Webb with the state parks. I need information about the old Riverside Cemetery, specifically about unmarked graves that weren't relocated in 1961. There was a pause. "That's oddly specific. May I ask why?" "Safety investigation," I said, keeping my tone professional. "There may be unmarked burial sites affecting trail stability." Another pause. "I see. Well, I did research on that cemetery years ago. Most of the unmarked graves were from the 1880s and 1890s before record-keeping became standardized. Poor families mostly, people who couldn't afford headstones. Do you know if any of them were connected to drowning victims, specifically people who drowned in the Meriwether River?" The silence that followed was heavy. When Dr. Kaczynski spoke again, her voice changed. "You've seen her, haven't you?" My grip tightened on the phone. "Who?" "The woman in white, the one who appears before the river rises." I couldn't speak. Dr. Kaczynski sighed. "I've heard the stories for years, local folklore mostly dismissed as superstition. But there's always been talk of a woman who haunts the river, a bride who drowned before her wedding day." "Sarah Whitmore," I said. "That's the name that gets mentioned most often, yes, but the phenomenon predates her death. There were reports of a river ghost as far back as the 1890s. Sarah Whitmore may be the most recent victim, but she's not the original." My mind raced. Then who is? That's the question I could never answer. The original cemetery records burned in a courthouse fire in 1923. We know there was a grave there, unmarked, belonging to a young woman. She's mentioned in one journal entry from 1891, written by a minister who performed her burial. He described her as a poor child taken by the water before her joy could be realized. A bride, drowned before her wedding day. Just like Sarah Whitmore had drowned weeks before her wedding day. "Dr. Kaczynski, I need to know exactly where that grave is located. She have coordinates from the original cemetery plat map, but I should warn you, Mr. Webb, multiple people have tried to address this over the years. Memorial plaques, prayer services, even an exorcism in the 1970s. Nothing worked. Whatever's there doesn't want to be appeased." "I have to try," I said. She gave me the coordinates. I thanked her and hung up. Then I stood at mile marker 4, looking at the ground, and began to plan. I couldn't dig up a state trail without authorization, and I couldn't get authorization without explaining why I wanted to dig, so I had to be smart about this. I requisitioned ground-penetrating radar equipment under the guise of checking for trail subsidence. The GPR unit arrived 2 days later, and I spent the afternoon of August 12th scanning the area around mile marker 4. The results were conclusive. Approximately 6 feet below the current trail surface, there was a distinct rectangular anomaly consistent with a burial vault. Wooden, probably pine, collapsed but still intact enough to register on the scan. This was it, the unmarked grave, the source of the haunting. I now had to decide what to do about it. Dr. Kaczynski had said that previous attempts at appeasement had failed, but those attempts had been performative, done from a distance, treating the grave as a curiosity rather than a person. Nobody had actually addressed the core problem,
The woman buried here, whoever she was, had been forgotten. Her grave had been paved over, literally erased from history. And then Sarah Whitmore, another bride robbed of her future, had drowned in the same spot, her spirit drawn to the older, angrier presence already bound to this place. They weren't causing the floods out of random malice. They were crying out. They were demanding to be remembered. I could give them that. On the night of August 14th, I returned to mile marker 4 with supplies. A shovel, a heavy-duty pry bar, flowers, white roses, a small wooden cross I'd carved myself, and a silver ring I'd purchased that afternoon, plain and simple, the kind a poor family might have afforded in the 1890s, the kind a bride might have worn. I started digging at midnight. The August heat had broken, and the air was cool, almost cold. The river beside me was silent, too silent. I broke through the gravel layer, then the asphalt, then the compacted fill dirt beneath. My hands blistered, my back ached, but I kept digging, widening the hole, going deeper. At 4 feet down, my shovel hit something solid, wood, rotted and fragile but unmistakable. I'd found her. I cleared away more dirt, exposing the top of the casket. The wood was black with age and decay, held together more by the surrounding earth than its own integrity. I said a quiet prayer, then gently, carefully, I laid the roses on top of the casket. I'm sorry you were forgotten. I'm sorry your grave was taken from you. I'm sorry no one honored your memory. The air grew colder. The river behind me began to move. I'm placing this ring as a symbol, I continued, my voice shaking slightly. You were meant to be a bride. You deserved that joy. I can't give it back to you, but I can acknowledge what was taken. I set the silver ring carefully on the casket next to the roses. Then I planted the wooden cross at the head of the grave. May you be remembered. May you find peace. The river roared. I turned just in time to see the water rising, not gradually, but all at once, a wall of black water surging toward me with murderous intent. I tried to scramble out of the hole, but my foot caught on the edge of the casket. The water hit me like a physical blow, filling the grave, pulling me down. I went under, my lungs burning, my hands clawing at dirt and darkness. Through the murky water, I saw her.
Not one woman. 2. The first was ancient, her features eroded by time, wearing the rotted remnants of a wedding dress from another century. The second was Sarah Whitmore, still young, still wearing her white summer dress, her eyes fixed on me with an expression I couldn't read. They reached for me. I stopped fighting. If they wanted me dead, I was already gone. If they wanted something else, struggling wouldn't help. So I let the water hold me, and I met their eyes, and I thought as clearly as I could, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what was done to you. I'm sorry you suffered. You deserved better. The older ghost's hand touched my face, cold as ice, gentle as a whisper. Then the water released me. I burst to the surface, gasping, clawing my way out of the grave. I lay on the trail, coughing up river water, my whole body shaking. When I could finally breathe again, I looked around. The river was calm, normal, the water level exactly where it should be. The grave I dug was empty of water, though the ground around it was soaked. The roses I'd placed were gone, dissolved or carried away. The wooden cross stood upright, and the silver ring was nowhere to be seen. I filled in the grave as the sun rose. By 7 a.m., I'd restored the trail surface as best I could, packing down the gravel, smoothing it over. You couldn't tell anything had been disturbed unless you looked very carefully. I filed a report about trail subsidence repair at mile marker 4. Nobody questioned it. Over the next 2 weeks, I patrolled the river trail daily, watching,
waiting for signs of the haunting to return. Nothing happened. The river stayed calm. The water levels remained predictable. No dripping woman appeared on the opposite bank. On August 28th, I brought Dr. Kaczynski to the site. I showed her where I'd dug, what I'd found, what I'd done. She stood there for a long time, looking at the ground, then at the river. "I think you did it," she said quietly. "I think you gave them what they needed: acknowledgement, respect, a chance to be seen." "Will it last?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't know. Ghosts are manifestations of unfinished business, unresolved trauma. You addressed the immediate cause, but memory is fragile. As long as this trail exists, as long as people walk over that grave without knowing what's beneath their feet, there's a risk the anger will return." "Then we need to make sure people remember," I said. It took 3 months and a lot of bureaucratic wrangling, but I managed to get a memorial plaque installed at mile marker 4. It reads, "In memory of those laid to rest at the old Riverside Cemetery, 1870 to 1961. May their spirits find peace in these hills they once called home." It doesn't name the bride from the 1890s. We don't know her name, but it acknowledges her. That's what matters. I haven't seen the ghost since that night. The river has been calm. No mysterious floods, no apparitions. But something changed. A week after I filled in the grave, I was doing a routine patrol at dawn when I noticed something glinting in the shallows near mile marker 4. I waded in, curious, and picked it up. It was a ring. Silver. Old. Tarnished green in places, but still intact. It wasn't the ring I'd left on the casket. This one was different. Heavier, more ornate, and engraved on the inside, in letters so worn I could barely read them, was a date, June 14th, 1891. I stood there in the river, holding this impossible object, and I understood. This was her ring, the original bride's wedding ring, the one she'd been buried with over a century ago. She'd given it to me, not as a threat or a curse, but as a gift, as proof, as a way of saying she'd been real, she existed, she mattered. I keep it in a small wooden box on my desk at the ranger station. Sometimes when I'm filling out paperwork or planning patrol routes, I open the box and look at it. A reminder that this job isn't just about maintaining trails and checking call boxes. It's about respecting the land and everyone who came before us, even the ones who've been forgotten. Especially the ones who've been forgotten. The Meriwether River flows quiet now. The trail is safe. Hikers walk mile marker 4 every day without incident, without knowing what lies beneath their feet. But I know. And somewhere, in whatever place ghosts go when their business is finished, 2 brides finally found their peace. The river remembers them. And so do I.
I've driven Old Sawmill Fire Road 847 times in my career. I know every pothole, every curve, every mile marker between the Eastern Gate and the Overlook Tower. 13 miles of straight gravel cutting through some of the densest forest in the southern Appalachians, maintained for emergency access and logging operations that haven't been active since the 1970s. My name is James Harlow. I'm 52 years old, been a ranger with the Appalachian Forest Service for 27 years. I've seen black bears up close, pulled hikers out of ravines, fought wildfires that turned the sky orange for days. I thought I knew these mountains, every secret, every danger. I was wrong. It was October 17th, 3:14 a.m., when I started what should have been a routine night patrol. The forecast called for fog, normal for this time of year. Nothing unusual. My truck was a 2019 Ford F-250, diesel engine, winch mounted on the front, light bar on the roof. Standard issue, reliable. I'd driven it through mud, snow, ice, never had a problem. I radioed dispatch before heading out. Station 4, this is Harlow, beginning patrol of Fire Road 47, estimated completion 4:30. Copy that, Harlow. Weather's getting thick out there. Drive safe. Always do. I pulled through the gate at the eastern entrance, locked it behind me per protocol, and started up the road. The headlights cut through the fog that hung in the trees like cotton, reducing visibility to maybe 50 yards. Not great, but I'd driven in worse. The road stretched ahead, perfectly straight, disappearing into the fog like a tunnel. On both sides, the forest pressed in close, pines and oaks forming solid walls of darkness beyond the reach of my headlights. I drove at 20 miles per hour, checking the shoulder for washouts or fallen trees. Everything looked normal. Routine. Boring, even. At 3:23 a.m., I reached mile marker 4, halfway point. I stopped to log the checkpoint in my patrol book, a habit from the old days before digital systems. The engine idled smoothly. The radio played quiet country music. Everything was exactly as it should be. Then the temperature dropped. Not gradually, instantly. 1 second it was 58 degrees according to the dash thermometer. The next second it read 31. Frost began to form on the inside of the windshield even though the heater was running full blast. I reached for the radio to report the anomaly, but before I could key the mic, the engine sputtered. Once, twice, then died completely. The headlights went out. The dashboard went dark. The radio cut to silence mid-song. Every electrical system in the truck failed simultaneously, leaving me sitting in absolute darkness in the middle of a fire road 13 miles from the nearest paved highway.
I tried the ignition. Nothing. Not even a click. The battery was completely dead, like someone had disconnected it while I wasn't looking. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, my training kicking in, running through the possibilities. Electrical failure. Could be a short circuit. Could be the alternator. Could be a dozen different mechanical problems. But none of that explained the temperature drop. None of that explained the absolute silence that had fallen over the forest. I rolled down the window manually, the crank stiff from cold. The night air that came in was Arctic, wrong for October, wrong for the southern mountains, and it carried a smell I didn't recognize. Metallic, sharp, like ozone after a lightning strike, but stronger, more chemical. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket and flicked it on. Nothing. Dead. I tried my radio, also dead. My phone showed no signal, and the battery was at 1%, even though I'd charged it fully before the shift. Every electronic device I had was dead or dying. And then I heard it. A sound like breathing, deep, slow, rhythmic, coming from somewhere ahead on the road, obscured by the fog. I squinted into the darkness, trying to see what was making the sound. The fog was thicker now, rolling across the road in waves, reducing visibility to maybe 20 feet. The breathing continued. In, out, each breath lasting 5 or 6 seconds, like something with massive lungs taking its time. Then I saw the eyes. They appeared in the fog at the far edge of my vision, maybe 100 yards down the road. 2 points of light, pale yellow-green, positioned about 5 feet off the ground. Too far apart to be a deer, too high to be a coyote, and they were looking directly at me. I've seen plenty of animals at night. Their eyes reflect light, catch it from headlights or flashlights, and shine it back. But these weren't reflecting anything. My lights were dead. My flashlight was dead. There was no light source for them to reflect. These eyes were glowing.
producing their own light, bioluminescent or something else I couldn't explain. The breathing sound intensified, faster now, still deep, still powerful, but with a rhythm that suggested excitement or anticipation. Whatever owned those eyes knew I was here, and it was interested. I reached for the door handle, thinking maybe I should get out, move away from the truck, find cover in the trees, but my hand froze on the handle as a terrible realization hit me. The eyes were getting closer. I hadn't heard footsteps, hadn't heard movement, but the eyes were definitely closer now, maybe 70 yards, still at the same height, still locked on me. Whatever it was approaching, and it was doing so in complete silence. I watched, paralyzed by a fear I couldn't rationalize, as the eyes continued to close the distance. 60 yards, 50 yards. The fog swirled around them, backlit by their glow, creating patterns that hurt to look at. At 40 yards, I started to see the shape. It was massive, quadrupedal, built low to the ground like a bear, but much larger. The body was wrong, though. Too long, too many joints in the legs. The proportions didn't match any animal I knew. 30 yards. The breathing was loud enough now that I could feel it. Deep bass notes that made my truck vibrate, that made my chest ache with each inhalation. 20 yards. I could see details now. Dark fur or skin, matted and wet-looking. The head was enormous, wider than a grizzly's, with those glowing eyes set deep in the skull. And the mouth, God, the mouth. It hung slightly open, revealing teeth that caught the eye glow and glittered like white stone. 15 yards. It wasn't running, wasn't charging, just walking, a steady, patient approach that somehow covered ground faster than should be possible. Each step it took should have moved it forward by maybe 3 feet, but it crossed 5 feet, 6 feet. The distance between us collapsed in ways that violated basic geometry. 10 yards. I could see its breath now, clouds of vapor that glowed faintly green in the air before dissipating. The temperature had even dropped further. Ice was forming on my truck's hood, crystallizing in fractal patterns that looked almost deliberate. 5 yards. It stopped. We were separated by less than 15 feet. The creature stood at the edge of my headlight range, though the lights were dead, as if respecting some invisible boundary. Its eyes never left mine, didn't blink, didn't waver. Up close, I could see it wasn't quite real. The edges were wrong, blurred, like looking at something through water or heat shimmer. Its form kept shifting slightly, never quite settling into a fixed shape. One moment it looked like a massive wolf, the next something reptilian, then something else entirely, something with too many limbs and joints that bent the wrong way. It opened its mouth wider, not threatening, not aggressive, just opening, revealing a throat that went down and down and down, impossibly deep, glowing with that same yellow-green light. And then it spoke. Not in words, not in any language, but I heard it in my head, a voice that wasn't sound, but pure meaning, downloaded directly into my brain.
That's all it said. One word, one concept, but packed into that single word was a weight of intention that nearly crushed me. This thing wanted me to see it, to acknowledge it, to carry the knowledge of its existence forward. I tried to look away. Couldn't. Its eyes held mine with a force that felt physical, like hooks in my skull pulling my gaze forward. Witness what comes before. Before what? Before humanity, before civilization, before the mountains themselves? I don't know how long we stayed like that. Seconds, minutes. Time felt broken, stretched and compressed simultaneously. My watch had stopped at 3:23, frozen at the exact moment the truck died. Then, with a movement too fast to follow, the creature reached out. I saw the limb extend. Not a paw, not quite a claw, something in between or outside those categories entirely. It had too many fingers, each one ending in something that looked like obsidian, black and sharp and gleaming. The limb came down on the hood of my truck. The sound was incredible. Metal screaming, steel tearing like paper. The entire truck rocked backward from the impact, suspension groaning, tires skidding on gravel despite the parking brake being engaged. When the limb withdrew, it left marks. 5 deep gouges cut completely through the hood, through the metal and the engine block beneath, down to the frame. The cuts were perfectly parallel, each one exactly 2 inches wide and impossibly smooth, like they'd been carved by industrial equipment rather than organic material. And they glowed. Faint yellow-green light emanated from the gouges, the same color as the creature's eyes, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. The creature lowered its head, bringing those eyes level with mine through the windshield. We were face to face now, separated only by a sheet of glass that suddenly seemed very thin and very fragile. Witness what comes walks the old roads. Then it exhaled. The breath came through the hood vents, through gaps in the door seals, through every tiny opening in the truck's cabin. That metallic smell intensified, became overwhelming, made my eyes water and my throat burn. And in that breath, I saw things. Visions, memories, not mine, the creatures, or maybe the mountains. Images flashing through my mind faster than thought. The forest before humans, before trees, when the mountains were young and sharp and the air was poison. Creatures moving through that ancient landscape, things that had no names because there was no one to name them, things that predated categorization, things that simply were. And this creature, or things like it, walking the paths that would one day become fire roads and highways and trails, marking territory, claiming space, existing in the gaps between what evolution would eventually produce. Most of them died out or changed or adapted into forms we now recognize. Bears, wolves, mountain lions, echoes of their earlier, stranger selves. But some remained. Some held to their original forms, retreating into deep places, emerging only occasionally to remind the world that they were here first and would be here last. This was one of them, a thing from before, a remnant, a witness to ages we can't comprehend and shouldn't try to. The visions stopped as suddenly as they'd started. I was back in my truck, gasping, my nose bleeding, my head pounding like someone had driven a spike through my skull. The creature was still there, still watching, still waiting. Then, with that same impossible speed, it turned and walked away. Not running, not fleeing, just leaving. Moving back the road the way it had come, covering distance that should have taken minutes in what felt like seconds. The fog closed around it like a curtain, swallowing it whole, leaving only the faint glow of its eyes visible for a moment longer. Then even that was gone. I sat in the truck, shaking, bleeding, trying to understand what had just happened. The temperature was rising, slowly, degree by degree, returning to normal October levels. The frost on the windshield began to melt. I tried the ignition again. Nothing. The truck was still completely dead, all systems offline, the dashboard dark and silent. I checked my watch, still stopped at 3:23. My phone was at 0%, completely drained, the screen black and unresponsive. The only light came from the gouges in the hood. They still glowed, faint but persistent, casting weird shadows inside the cabin. I needed to signal for help. I was 13 miles from the nearest gate, 6.5 miles from the overlook tower where I knew there was emergency radio equipment. Walking in the dark through fog on a mountain road with something like that out there was suicide. But I couldn't stay in the truck forever. I reached into the back seat and grabbed my emergency kit. Inside was a flare gun, 6 flares, a hand crank radio, and various first aid supplies. I loaded the flare gun, cranked the radio until the battery indicator showed a charge, and tried to establish contact. Static. Just static. But the radio was working, which meant the electromagnetic interference, or whatever had killed my truck's systems, was fading. I fired a flare straight up. It arced into the sky, burning bright red against the fog, visible for miles in every direction. Standard distress signal. Anyone watching would know a ranger was in trouble. I waited, cranked the radio again, tried different frequencies. At 3:47 a.m., I got a response. "This is Station 4. We see your flare. What's your situation, Harlow?" I keyed the mic, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold it. "Truck's dead. All systems. I'm at mile marker 4 on Fire Road 47. I need immediate extraction." "Copy that. What happened? Mechanical failure?" I looked at the glowing gouges in my hood, at the patterns they made, at the way they seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. "Unknown," I said. "Just get me out of here." "Dispatch is sending Ranger Collins from the Western Gate. ETA 20 minutes. Sit tight, Harlow. You injured?" "Negative. Just shaken up." "Understood. Stay on this frequency. We'll maintain contact." I sat there in the dark, listening to the forest slowly come back to life. The absolute silence that had fallen when the creature appeared was lifting. I could hear wind in the trees now, distant animal sounds, the normal night chorus of the Appalachians. But I kept the flare gun loaded, kept watching the road ahead, the fog, the spaces between the trees. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours.
Ranger Tom Collins arrived at 4:09 a.m. in his truck, headlights cutting through the thinning fog. He pulled up alongside me and got out, flashlight in hand, concern written across his face. "Harlow, you okay?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He approached my truck, saw the hood, and stopped dead. Jesus Christ, what did that? I don't know. He played his flashlight over the gouges. They were still glowing, though fainter now, barely visible in the beam. These cuts go all the way through the hood, through the engine. What could do this? I said, "I don't know." Tom looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the concern deepen. "Your nose is bleeding, and your eyes. Jim, your eyes are bloodshot to hell. What happened out here?" "Something hit my truck, killed the electrical system. I signaled for help. That's all I can tell you." It wasn't all I could tell him, but it was all I was going to tell him, because if I told him the truth, told him about the creature and the visions and the voice in my head, he'd call for a medical evac, and I'd spend the next week in psychiatric evaluation. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't be taken off duty, because if I was, they'd send someone else to patrol this road, someone who didn't know what was out here, someone who might not survive the next encounter. Tom helped me into his truck. We hooked up a tow chain to my vehicle and pulled it back down the road toward the eastern gate. My truck rolled easily enough, but even with Tom's engine running, the lights stayed dead, the dashboard dark. As we drove, I kept watching the road ahead, the fog, the trees, looking for those eyes, that shape, that presence. But the road was empty, normal, just another fire road in the Appalachian Mountains, exactly like 1,000 others. We reached the gate at 4:42 a.m. Station 4 had sent a recovery team with a flatbed. They loaded my truck and hauled it to the maintenance facility for evaluation. The head mechanic called me 3 days later. "Harlow, this is Davis at the garage. I need to talk to you about your truck." "What about it?" "We can't fix it." "What do you mean you can't fix it?" "I mean the damage is unlike anything I've ever seen. Those gouges in the hood, they didn't just cut through the metal. They fused it somehow.
changed the molecular structure. The steel around the cuts is brittle, crystallized, like it was exposed to extreme temperatures and then frozen solid in seconds. And the engine. Christ, the engine. Every component is seized, completely locked up. Nothing will turn. We'd have to replace the entire block, and even then, I'm not sure the truck would run. There's something wrong with it on a fundamental level. So what are you saying? I'm saying we're totaling it, writing it off as a complete loss. And Jim, between you and me, I'm recommending it be destroyed rather than salvaged. I don't want parts from this thing going into other vehicles. Whatever happened to it, it's like the truck itself is contaminated. I thanked him and hung up. Then I pulled out my patrol log and made an entry. October 17th, 2024, 3:23 a.m., mile marker 4, Fire Road 47. Encountered unknown wildlife. Extreme caution advised for future patrols. Recommend avoiding this route during night hours until further notice. I submitted the report. My supervisor read it, asked a few questions I answered vaguely, then filed it away. The road was temporarily closed for maintenance evaluation. That was 6 months ago.
Fire Road 47 has been reopened. They installed new signage, repaired some washouts, declared it safe for ranger patrols. The official report said my truck suffered a catastrophic electrical failure, possibly due to a lightning strike that I didn't remember because of minor head trauma from the incident. They gave me a new truck, 2024 model, same specs, same equipment, everything identical to the one I lost. Except I can't drive it on Fire Road 47. I've tried. 3 times now I've pulled up to the eastern gate, unlocked it, sat there with my hand on the gear shift ready to proceed with the patrol. And I can't do it. My body won't let me. The moment I think about driving that road, about going past mile marker 4, about being in that place where the creature appeared, my hands start shaking, my vision blurs, my heart rate spikes to dangerous levels. It's not fear, not exactly. It's something deeper, more primal. My body remembers what my mind experienced and refuses to repeat the exposure. So I don't patrol Fire Road 47 anymore. I've requested permanent reassignment to other sectors, and my supervisor approved it without comment. Another ranger handles that route now. Younger guy, confident, talks about how peaceful it is up there, how he's never seen any wildlife more dangerous than a black bear. He hasn't worked a night shift there yet. I haven't warned him. What would I say? That something lives on that road? Something before? Something that defies explanation? That the mountains are older than we know and remember things we've forgotten? He'd think I was crazy. Hell, most days I think I'm crazy. But then I remember the visions, the voice, the weight of that single word pressed into my consciousness. Witness. That's what it wanted. Not to hurt me, not to kill me, just to be seen, to be acknowledged, to remind one human being that we're not alone in these mountains, that we never have been, that there are things here that predate our understanding and will outlast our civilization. I was chosen for that witnessing. Or maybe I was just unlucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. Either way, I carry the knowledge now, the burden of knowing what walks the old roads when humans aren't watching. And sometimes, late at night when I'm driving other routes in the park, I see things in my peripheral vision, shapes that don't quite match known animals, eyes that glow with their own light, movement that covers distance faster than physics should allow. I don't turn to look. I don't investigate. I just keep driving, maintain my patrol route, and pretend I didn't see anything. Because I understand now, there are things in these mountains that humans aren't meant to confront directly, things that exist in the spaces between our knowledge and our fear, things that only reveal themselves to witnesses. And once you've been chosen as a witness, once you've seen what walks the old roads, you can never unsee it.
I thought I could avoid Fire Road 47 forever. Transfer to different sectors, work different shifts, build a career around that one blind spot in my patrol territory. I was wrong. On March 3rd, 6 months after the incident, I got a call at 2:47 a.m. Dispatch. Emergency tone. Harlow, we need you to respond to Fire Road 47. Ranger Mitchell hasn't checked in from his patrol. Last known position was mile marker 4. We're getting no response on radio. Mitchell, the young ranger who'd taken over my route. Confident, experienced, completely unprepared for what he might encounter. I can't drive that road. Jim, a ranger is missing. You're the senior officer on duty. This isn't a request. She was right. I knew she was right. My personal trauma didn't matter when someone's life was on the line. I'll go, I said, but I'm bringing backup. Tell Station 7 to send someone to meet me at the western gate. Copy that. Harlow, be careful. I drove to the park in my personal vehicle, transferred to my Ranger truck, and headed for Fire Road 47's western gate. The backup from Station 7 was already there when I arrived. Ranger Sarah Chen, mid-30s, solid reputation. What's the situation? She asked as I unlocked the gate. Mitchell missed his check-in. Last known position was mile marker 4. That's where you had your incident. Everyone knew about my incident. Not the details, but the fact that something had happened, that my truck had been destroyed, that I'd requested reassignment. Yeah, that's where it happened. What should I watch for? I didn't answer, just got in my truck and started up the road, Chen following in hers. The fog was back, thick and heavy, reducing visibility to almost nothing, just like that night. We drove slowly, our headlights barely penetrating the murk. Mile marker 1, mile marker 2, mile marker 3. At mile marker 4, we found Mitchell's truck. It was parked in the middle of the road, exactly where mine had been. Engine off, lights dead, all systems dark. And the hood had 5 deep gouges carved through it, glowing faint yellow-green in the darkness. Stay in your vehicle, I radioed to Chen. Do not get out. Do not approach his truck. I see him. He's in the cab, not moving. I could see him too. Mitchell slumped in the driver's seat, his head tilted back, his eyes open and staring at nothing. I grabbed my flashlight, my flare gun, and stepped out of my truck. The temperature dropped immediately. The same Arctic cold, the same metallic smell. Harlow, what's happening? Chen's voice over the radio. My electronics just died. Everything's offline. Stay in your truck, I repeated, and whatever you see, don't try to interact with it. I approached Mitchell's vehicle, my flashlight beam cutting through the fog. The closer I got, the more I could see. The frost on his windows, the ice crystals forming on his skin, the complete stillness of his body. I opened the door. Mitchell fell against me, rigid, frozen solid like he'd been sitting in a deep freeze for hours instead of minutes. But he was breathing. Shallow, slow, but breathing. Mitchell, can you hear me?
His eyes moved, slowly, tracking toward my face. His lips tried to form words but couldn't. His entire body was hypothermic, shut down to near-death levels. Then I heard it, that deep, rhythmic breathing coming from the fog ahead. I turned, and there it was. The creature, exactly as I remembered. Massive, quadrupedal, eyes glowing with that yellow-green light, standing maybe 30 yards down the road, watching, waiting. Witness again. The voice in my head. Not angry, not threatening, just stating fact. I already witnessed, I said aloud. I already saw you. I already carry your message.
Not for you, for her. I understood then. The creature hadn't come for me. It had come for Chen, for the next witness, for the next person who needed to understand what walked these mountains. She doesn't need to see this. Let her stay in her truck. Let her leave with her eyes closed. Not her choice, not yours. The mountain chooses. I looked back at Chen's truck. She was still inside, her face pressed against the window, staring at the creature with an expression I recognized, the same terror and awe I'd felt, the same inability to look away. The creature began to approach, that same impossible speed, covering ground faster than it should, defying the physics of motion and distance. I had seconds to decide. Let it happen. Let Chen experience what I'd experienced. Let her carry the burden of witnessing, or try to stop it. I raised the flare gun and fired directly at the creature. The flare hit its center mass, burning bright red, impossibly bright in the fog. The creature stopped, not recoiling, not in pain, just stopping, its attention shifting from Chen to me. Interference. Yeah, interference. You already have your witness. You don't need another one. The mountain needs many witnesses, many voices, many who remember. Then show yourself in daylight. Make yourself known. Stop hiding in fog and darkness and fear. We do not hide. We wait for those strong enough to see, for those willing to carry truth forward. What truth? That things like you exist? That the mountains have secrets? People won't believe us. They'll think we're crazy. Belief is not required. Knowledge is enough. You carry it now. She will carry it. Others will follow. Eventually, enough will know. Enough will remember. Enough will witness. And then what? Then the gate opens. Then what was before returns. Then the mountains remember fully. I didn't know what that meant, didn't want to know, but I understood the stakes now. Every person who witnessed the creature became part of a countdown. 44 out of 77, 33 to go. What if I refuse? What if I tell Chen to close her eyes, turn around, never come back here? You cannot refuse what has already begun. She has seen, she has heard, she is witness now. I looked back at Chen. She was out of her truck now, standing in the road, her face illuminated by the creature's glow, transfixed, transformed, already being shown the visions, the memories, the truth of what walked before. I'd failed to protect her, failed to stop the witnessing. The creature turned its attention back to her, approaching slowly now, respectfully, like a priest performing a sacred rite. It reached out with that impossible limb and touched her truck's hood, leaving the same 5 parallel gouges, the same glowing marks. The mark of the witness. Then it withdrew, backing into the fog, eyes still locked on us both. 44 now, 33 more. The gate approaches. And it was gone.
We got Mitchell to a hospital. He survived, but never returned to ranger duty. Extreme hypothermia, they said. Exposure. He was lucky to be alive. He doesn't talk about what he saw. Doesn't have to. I can see it in his eyes. He's a witness too. 45. Chen transferred to my sector. We don't talk about Fire Road 47, but we don't have to. We recognize each other now. Recognize the weight we carry, the knowledge we can't share, the countdown we're part of. Sometimes I check the incident reports from other national forests, looking for familiar patterns. Trucks with electrical failures, rangers reporting unusual wildlife encounters, mysterious gouges left in metal. I find them. Not often, but regularly enough to see the pattern. Every few months, somewhere in the Appalachian Range,
another witness is created. 46, 47, 48. The count continues. I still work as a ranger, still patrol the mountains I love, but I patrol differently now. I watch for the signs, the fog, the temperature drops, the moment when electronics fail and the old world pushes through. And I wait. We all wait. Those of us who've seen, those of us who carry the marks, visible or otherwise. Waiting for witness 77.
The stone cabin on Raven's Peak had been watching over the Appalachian ridgeline for nearly 200 years, built by settlers who thought they could tame these mountains, abandoned when they learned otherwise, and eventually claimed by the National Forest Service as a maintenance station, though station was generous for what amounted to 4 stone walls, a slate roof that leaked, and a fireplace that drew smoke more often than it vented it. I'd volunteered for the overnight stay. Someone needed to repair the weather monitoring equipment bolted to the cabin's north wall, and the hike up was brutal enough that most rangers found excuses to avoid it. But I'd always liked the isolation up here. At 6,200 feet, Raven's Peak was one of the highest points in this section of the Appalachians, high enough that the clouds often passed below you, leaving you floating in a sea of white with only the surrounding peaks breaking through like islands. High enough that you could see for miles in every direction when the weather was clear. High enough that other things could see you too. I reached the cabin around 4 p.m., my legs burning from the climb. The trail up Raven's Peak gained nearly 3,000 feet in just over 4 miles, switchbacking up the mountain's eastern face through dense hardwood forest that eventually gave way to stunted spruce and exposed rock. The last half-mile was above treeline, scrambling over loose scree with nothing but sky above and a stomach-turning drop below. The cabin sat in a small saddle between Raven's Peak's main summit and a subsidiary bump to the north. Someone had chosen the location well, sheltered from the worst of the wind, with a spring trickling out of the rocks nearby and a view that made the brutal hike worthwhile. To the east, the Piedmont stretched away in layers of blue haze. To the west, wave after wave of mountain ridges marched toward the horizon, each one a shade lighter than the last until they faded into sky. And directly north, across a narrow gap maybe 300 yards wide, stood Carrion Ridge. The name had always bothered me. Most of the peaks around here had Cherokee names, or descriptive ones given by early settlers: Bald Mountain, Water Rock Knob, Cold Spring Gap. But Carrion Ridge had earned its name more recently, sometime in the 1800s, after a series of mysterious die-offs had left the ridge littered with dead birds. Hundreds of them, ravens and crows mostly, just dropped from the sky over the course of a single night. The locals had burned the carcasses and avoided the ridge for decades afterward. Even now, nothing grew on Carrion Ridge's summit. While every other peak in the area was either forested or covered in low scrub, Carrion Ridge's highest point was just bare rock, a dark, jagged spine that caught the last light of day and held it like a blade. I tried not to look at it as I unlocked the cabin door. The interior was exactly as I'd left it 6 months ago during my last maintenance check. One room, maybe 15 feet square, with the fireplace taking up most of the west wall. A rough wooden table and chair, a cot with a thin mattress that smelled of mildew, shelves holding emergency supplies, first aid kit, weather radio, spare batteries, water purification tablets, a propane lantern hanging from a hook in the ceiling beam, and windows, 3 of them. One facing east toward the parking lot 4 miles below, one facing south toward the main ridgeline, and one facing north toward Carrion Ridge. I set down my pack and got to work. The The weather station's anemometer had been reporting erratic wind speeds for months, probably because ice had damaged the bearings during the winter. I'd need to disassemble it, clean everything, re-grease the moving parts, and calibrate it against my handheld unit. 4, maybe 5 hours of work if everything went smoothly. I started with the external repairs while I still had good light. The anemometer mount was on the north wall, naturally, because that's where the prevailing winds came from. I had to lean out the window to reach it, my upper body hanging over a drop that would kill me just as dead as any other 1,000-foot fall. The sun was getting low, painting Carrion Ridge in shades of amber and gold, beautiful in a stark kind of way. The bare rocks seemed to glow from within, and for a moment I could almost understand why someone would build the cabin up here despite the difficulty of access. There was something about being this high, this exposed, that made you feel both insignificant and transcendent. That's when I noticed the figure.
At first, I thought it was a rock formation. Carrion Ridge's summit was maybe a quarter-mile away across the gap, close enough to make out details in the fading light, and there, standing on the highest point of the ridge, was what looked like a pillar of stone. Tall, taller than it should be, taller than any natural formation had a right to be. I pulled my binoculars from my pack and focused on the summit. Not a rock formation. A person, or something shaped like a person, standing utterly still, facing toward the cabin. The figure was massive. Even at this distance, even allowing for perspective, I could tell it was far larger than any human. 8 feet tall? Maybe more. It was hard to judge scale without context, but something about the proportions was wrong. The shoulders too broad, the limbs too long, the head was wrong. I couldn't make out details. The light was fading fast now, but the shape wasn't right. Too elongated, too angular, and there was something draped over the whole figure, a cloak or robe that hung motionless despite the wind I could feel buffeting the cabin. I pulled myself back through the window and latched it shut. Not that a latch would do anything against whatever that was, but the small act of securing the cabin made me feel marginally better. I lit the propane lantern and checked my phone. No signal, of course. We were too high and too isolated for cell coverage. The cabin had a satellite phone for emergencies, hardwired into the wall with a dedicated solar panel on the roof. But what would I say? That there was someone standing on Carrion Ridge? That I was spooked by a hiker with bad fashion sense? I made myself sit down at the table and eat dinner. Trail mix and jerky washed down with water from my bottle. My hands were shaking slightly, and I told myself it was just the cold. The temperature was dropping fast now that the sun was down. I should light a fire in the fireplace. But lighting a fire meant going to the north window again, meant turning my back on it while I arranged kindling and struck matches, meant illuminating the cabin interior while leaving everything outside in darkness. I left the fire unlit and pulled on my heavy jacket instead. The lantern cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. Outside the windows, I could see nothing but blackness and a scattering of stars. Too dark now to see Carrion Ridge or what stood on it. Maybe the figure had left. Maybe it had been a trick of the light all along, a weirdly shaped rock that my tired brain had interpreted as something sinister. I pulled out my maintenance log and tried to focus on filling out the day's entry. Date, arrival time, weather conditions, work completed. My handwriting looked shaky on the page. Then I made the mistake of looking at the north window. The figure was closer. Not on Carrion Ridge anymore. Not on the summit where I'd first seen it. Now it was on the near side of the ridge, at the edge of the gap that separated the two peaks. Still standing motionless. Still facing the cabin. Still impossibly large. I grabbed my spotlight, a powerful LED unit that could throw a beam for half a mile, and aimed it out the north window. My hands fumbled with the switch. The beam lanced out into the darkness, and I swept it across the gap toward where I'd seen it. The light found it immediately. God. Oh, God. It was massive, not 8 feet tall, 12 maybe, or 15. The cloak covered it from head to foot, a heavy fabric that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The hood was deep, so deep that the spotlight couldn't penetrate it. Where the face should be, there was only shadow, empty, absolute. But I could feel it looking at me. The figure stood at the very edge of Carrion Ridge, close enough now that I could see details. The cloak wasn't fabric, it was something else, something that moved wrong, that flowed and shifted even though there was no wind. And beneath the hem, where feet should be, nothing. The cloak simply ended and there was nothing beneath it. The figure wasn't standing on the ground, it was floating just above it, hovering at the edge of the 1,000-foot drop like gravity was optional. I killed the spotlight, plunged the night back into darkness. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The lantern light suddenly seemed far too bright, making the cabin a glowing beacon in the darkness, making me visible. I turned down the propane until the flame was barely a flicker, sat in the near darkness, listening to my own breathing, listening to the wind outside, the creaking of the cabin's old timbers, the sound of my pulse in my ears. And underneath it all, another sound, faint, rhythmic, like breathing but too slow, too deep, each inhalation lasting 10 seconds, 15, 20, each exhalation a sigh that I could almost feel through the cabin walls. Something was breathing, and it wasn't me. I don't know how long I sat there in the darkness, long enough for my eyes to adjust, long enough to make out the shapes of the furniture around me, the darker rectangles of the windows, long enough to realize that the north window was getting brighter. Not sunrise. It was only 9 p.m. I could see the time glowing on my watch face. But the north window was definitely getting brighter, as if something outside was emitting a faint luminescence. I approached the window slowly, staying to the side, not wanting to silhouette myself against the interior, pressed my face against the cold glass, and looked out. The figure stood in the same place, but now it was glowing, a soft, pale light that seemed to come from within the cloak itself, pulsing in rhythm with that slow, deep breathing. The light didn't illuminate anything around it, didn't light up the rocks beneath it or the air around it. It was simply there, a vertical column of dim radiance hanging in the darkness like a pillar of foxfire. And it was watching the cabin. I knew this with absolute certainty, even though I still couldn't see anything beneath that hood. The attention was physical, tangible, a pressure against my skin like standing too close to a fire. My satellite phone hung on the wall beside the north window. I grabbed it and punched in the emergency number for the ranger station. The phone clicked and whirred as it searched for a satellite connection. "Dispatch, this is Raven's Peak Cabin. Do you copy?" Static. Then a voice, distant and distorted. "Copy, Raven's Peak. This is dispatch. What's your status?" There's someone on Carrion Ridge. Someone watching the cabin." A pause. "Say again? You have a visual on a person?" "Something. I don't know what it is. It's big, really big, and it's just standing there." Another pause, longer this time. "Derek, is this a prank? Because I'm not joking. There's something out there." Okay, stay calm. Can you describe what you're seeing?" I looked out the window again. The figure hadn't moved. "It's maybe 12 feet tall, wearing some kind of cloak. It's glowing. It's been watching the cabin for hours." The pause that followed was long enough that I thought I'd lost the connection. Then, "Derek, there's a storm system moving in. Should hit your location around midnight. You're probably seeing some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. St. Elmo's fire, maybe, or this isn't St. Elmo's fire. This is something alive. Listen, you're at 6,200 feet. You've been hiking all day. The altitude can cause... I know what altitude sickness feels like. This isn't that. Then come down. If you're feeling unsafe, pack your gear and start down the trail. We'll have someone meet you at the trailhead." I looked out at the darkness beyond the cabin, at the narrow trail that wound down the mountain through miles of forest, at the thing standing on Carrion Ridge that could certainly move faster than I could hike. I don't think that's a good idea. Derek, I'm staying in the cabin. I'll call you in the morning. Wait! I hung up, set the phone back on its hook with shaking hands. The dispatcher was probably right. This was probably some kind of hallucination brought on by altitude and exhaustion and too many nights alone in the mountains. In the morning, I'd laugh about this. In the morning, the figure would be gone, and there would be nothing on Carrion Ridge but rocks and sky. I just had to make it to morning. Around 10 p.m., the wind picked up. Not the steady blow that usually swept across these high ridges, but gusts that hit the cabin like physical blows, making the old structure groan and shudder. The temperature dropped sharply. I could see my breath in the lantern light. The storm was coming, just like the dispatcher had said. I lit the fireplace because hypothermia was a more immediate threat than whatever was outside. The flames caught quickly, and soon I had a good blaze going. The heat felt wonderful, and the light pushed back the darkness in a way that the failing lantern couldn't. But the firelight also meant that anyone, anything outside could see in perfectly. The windows turned into bright rectangles, advertisements of my presence. I hung my sleeping bag over the north window like a curtain, blocking the view both ways. Then I sat by the fire and tried to convince myself I was safe. The storm hit around 11 p.m. Rain first, then sleet, hammering against the slate roof and the stone walls. Lightning flickered, illuminating the cabin in strobing white flashes. Thunder rolled across the mountains, so loud and sustained that it sounded like the sky was tearing itself apart. I should have been terrified of the storm. Up here, exposed on the ridge, lightning strikes were a real danger. But all I could think about was what was outside, standing in the deluge, still watching, still waiting. During one lightning flash, I pulled back the sleeping bag curtain and looked out the north window. The figure hadn't moved. Rain sheeted off the cloak like it was covered in oil. Lightning struck somewhere behind it, silhouetting that impossible shape against the white light, and for just a moment I saw something beneath the hood. Not a face. Faces have features, eyes, nose, mouth. This had none of those. What I saw in that fraction of a second illumination was smooth and featureless, like looking at a blank mask, or a void, a nothing that somehow looked back. I dropped the sleeping bag curtain and returned to the fire. My whole body was shaking now, and not from the cold. I fed more wood into the flames, making them burn brighter, higher. The fire was a comfort, a piece of human civilization, a thing that said I existed, I am here, I am real. The breathing sound had gotten louder. I could hear it clearly now, even over the storm, that slow, rhythmic inhalation and exhalation that seemed to come from all directions at once. The cabin itself seemed to breathe in rhythm with it, the walls expanding and contracting slightly with each cycle. I put my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't in the air. It was deeper than that, in the stone, in the ground, in my bones. Around 1 a.m., the storm began to break up. The rain dwindled to a drizzle, then stopped. The wind calmed. Through the east window, I could see gaps opening in the clouds, stars visible between the ragged edges. The fire had burned down to coals. I added more wood automatically, not really thinking about it, just needing the light and heat. The lantern had finally exhausted its propane and gone dark. I heard a sound from outside. Not the breathing, that had been constant for hours. This was different. Movement. The scrape of something heavy against stone. Footsteps. The figure was moving. I grabbed the spotlight again and went to the north window, pulled back the sleeping bag curtain. The moon had broken through the clouds, bright enough to see by, and what I saw made my bladder almost let go. The figure was halfway across the gap, not walking, not flying, just moving, gliding across the empty air between Carrion Ridge and Raven's Peak like the 1,000-foot drop beneath it didn't exist. The cloak flowed and shifted, and beneath it I could see nothing, no legs, no body, just shadow and that faint internal luminescence. It was coming to the cabin. I aimed the spotlight and turned it on. The beam hit the figure square in the chest, or where a chest should be, and something impossible happened. The light didn't reflect, didn't scatter. It hit the cloak and simply stopped, absorbed completely, like water soaking into parched earth. I could see the beam traveling through the air, a solid column of light extending from the window to the figure. But where it struck, nothing. A perfect circle of absolute darkness. And the circle was expanding. The blackness expanded outward from the point of impact, flowing across the cloak like ink in water. Within seconds, the entire figure was consumed by this darkness, becoming a shape cut from the fabric of night itself, a hole in the world. But it kept coming. I dropped the spotlight, heard it clatter on the floor. The figure was close now, maybe 50 yards away, still gliding through the air, still moving toward the cabin with that inexorable patience. I ran to the door. My hands fumbled with the bolt. When had I locked it? I didn't remember locking it. And finally got it open. Cold air rushed in, and I stumbled out into the night. The moonlight seemed impossibly bright after hours in the firelit cabin. I could see the trail descending the mountain to the east, a pale ribbon of crushed stone and exposed earth. 4 miles to the parking lot. 4 miles of steep, treacherous terrain in the dark. I ran anyway. I made it maybe 100 yards before I looked back. The figure had stopped. It hovered in front of the cabin's north window, completely motionless. The moonlight passed through it in places, or around it. I couldn't tell which. It was like looking at a heat shimmer, the distortion in reality that hurt to focus on. As I watched, it raised one arm. Not quickly, not in any kind of threat, just a slow, deliberate gesture, like it was pointing, or beckoning, or waving goodbye. The arm was too long. The limb that extended from beneath the cloak was at least 6 feet from shoulder to fingertips, jointed in too many places, ending in something that might have been a hand but had too many fingers, or too few. I couldn't quite make myself understand what I was seeing. My brain kept sliding away from it, refusing to process the image. Then the figure turned, not walking, not pivoting. It simply oriented in a different direction, facing back toward Carrion Ridge. And with that same patient gliding motion, it began to move away. I stood there in the cold darkness, watching it cross back over the gap, watching it reach Carrion Ridge and ascend to the summit without ever touching the ground, watching it return to the exact spot where I'd first seen it hours ago. And there it stopped, facing the cabin, waiting, or watching. I looked at the trail descending into darkness, looked at the cabin with its door standing open and firelight spilling out, looked at my gear inside, my pack, my food, my emergency supplies. The figure had stopped. It had approached, yes, but it had also stopped, and then it had retreated. That gesture it had made, I'd interpreted it as a wave, but maybe it was something else. Maybe it was a command. Leave. But it hadn't forced me to leave, hadn't attacked, hadn't even entered the cabin. It had simply insisted, suggested, made its wishes known. And I had fled. I stood there shivering for another minute, then made a decision that I knew was probably stupid. I walked back to the cabin. The figure didn't move as I approached. I kept my eyes on it as I slipped through the door, grabbed my pack and shouldered it, grabbed my spotlight from where I'd dropped it, took one last look at the fire burning in the hearth. Then I left. Pulled the door shut behind me, but didn't lock it.
If something that could fly through the air wanted to get into the cabin, a locked door wouldn't stop it. I started down the trail, moving as fast as I dared in the darkness. Every few minutes, I'd look back at Raven's Peak, at the dark bulk of the mountain silhouetted against the starlit sky. The figure never moved. It stood on Carrion Ridge like a sentinel, watching me go. I reached the parking lot as dawn was breaking, my legs trembling with exhaustion. My truck sat alone in the gravel lot, exactly where I'd left it. I'd never been so happy to see that beat-up old Ranger in my life. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there shaking for 10 minutes before I could make my hands steady enough to get the key in the ignition. I didn't report what happened. What was I going to say? I filed my maintenance report as incomplete due to severe weather and requested that someone else handle the cabin's equipment on a clear day with proper support. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, about that figure standing vigil on Carrion Ridge, about the way it had absorbed light like a black hole swallows stars, about that gesture it had made, leave, go, this place is not for you. 2 weeks later, I went back, not to the cabin, I'd probably never set foot in that cabin again, but to the Forest Service archives, looking for anything that might explain what I'd seen. I found references to Carrion Ridge going back to the 1700s, Cherokee stories about Sekilili, the night goer, a spirit that watched over high places and judged those who came too close to the sky. Settler accounts of the Dark Watcher seen on various peaks throughout the Appalachians. Reports of missing hikers whose bodies were found in impossible locations, as if they'd been carried by something that could fly. And I found incident reports, rangers and hikers over the decades who'd reported seeing a tall figure in dark clothing standing on distant peaks, always at night, always watching. The reports were always filed as misidentification or atmospheric phenomenon or exhaustion-induced hallucination. But there were too many of them, too many spanning too many years, too many describing the exact same thing. Last month, I talked to Ben Foster, one of our oldest rangers. He's been working these mountains for 40 years, knows every trail and peak like they're old friends. I asked him about Carrion Ridge, about why the summit stays bare when everything around it grows green. He gave me a long look, then said, "Some places belong to older things than us, Derek. The Cherokee knew it. The settlers learned it. We just keep forgetting." "Have you seen it?" I asked. "Once," he said. "Summer of '88. I was doing an overnight at Raven's Peak just like you. Woke up around 2 a.m. and looked out the window, and there it was. Tallest damn thing I ever saw, and I'm 6'4" myself. It just stood there all night, watching. Come dawn, it was gone." "What do you think it was?" "I don't know. Guardian, maybe, or a warning. Something that wants us to remember that these mountains were here long before we were, and they'll be here long after we." He paused. "Did it hurt you?"
Yesterday, a new ranger asked to take the overnight shift at Raven's Peak. Fresh out of training, eager to prove herself, wanting to experience the solitude and beauty of a high mountain night. I told her no. Told her the equipment could wait. Told her we'd send a team up during daylight hours with proper support. She asked why, and I didn't have a good answer. Not one I could put in an official report. So I just said that the cabin needed structural repairs before it was safe for overnight stays. She accepted that, thank God, but I saw her looking at me strangely, like she could tell I wasn't being completely honest. Maybe someday I'll tell her the truth. Maybe when she's been working these mountains long enough to know that not everything can be explained, that there are things in the high places that we're not meant to understand. For now, the cabin on Raven's Peak sits empty.
The weather station's anemometer still reports erratic readings. The maintenance log shows my incomplete report from November, and nothing since. And on clear nights, if you climb to one of the nearby peaks and look toward Carrion Ridge at the right time, you might see it. A tall figure in a dark cloak, standing perfectly still on the summit, watching, waiting, guarding something we are not meant to see. I went back once more, 3 days after my encounter, not to the cabin, but close enough to see it from a distance, close enough to use my binoculars and check on something I needed to verify. The north wall of the cabin, where I'd aimed my spotlight at the figure, where the beam had been absorbed into that impossible darkness, bore a mark, a perfect circle, maybe 6 feet in diameter, scorched into the stone, not burned like fire would burn, but changed. The rock was darker there, smoother, like it had been exposed to incredible heat and then cooled too fast, or like it had been touched by something that existed outside the normal rules of temperature and matter. The mark is still there. I checked the maintenance records, and no one has reported it. Maybe no one's been close enough to notice. Maybe it's only visible from certain angles. Or maybe everyone who sees it does what I did, makes a note, files it away, tries to forget. But I can't forget. Because 3 weeks ago, I found something in my truck, something that hadn't been there before, that I know I didn't bring back from the mountain. It was sitting on my dashboard when I came out of the ranger station after a long shift. Small, maybe 3 inches long, lying there like it had always been there and I just hadn't noticed. A feather. Black. Blacker than any bird feather I'd ever seen. So black it seemed to absorb light the same way that cloaked figure had. But it was warm to the touch. Warm like it had just come from a living creature. I keep it in my desk drawer now. I take it out sometimes, late at night when the station is empty and I'm alone with my thoughts. Hold it up to the light and watch the way the light bends around it, or through it, or simply stops at its surface. It's a reminder, I think. A message. The mountains remember. The high places are watched, and some things are patient enough to wait forever, standing sentinel on bare stone peaks, making sure we remember our place in the old order of things. I never did finish repairing that anemometer. The readings are still erratic, spinning up to impossible speeds and then dropping to 0 for no apparent reason. The maintenance schedule says it's due for service. But the cabin on Raven's Peak can wait. It's waited for 200 years. It can wait a little longer. And the figure on Carrion Ridge, the watchman, I've started calling it in my head, will be there whenever we're ready to return, standing motionless, facing the cabin, waiting with the patience of stone and the memory of mountains. Some nights I dream I'm back in that cabin, the fire burning low, the storm raging outside, and when I look out the north window, the figure is closer than it should be, close enough to touch, and that featureless face beneath the hood is looking at me with an attention that feels like it could see straight through skin and bone to whatever soul I have left. In the dream, it speaks, not with words, not with sound, but with a voice that resonates in my chest like distant thunder. You were permitted to leave. Not all are. Remember this gift. Remember what watches from the high places. Remember that mercy, once given, may not be given twice. I always wake up from that dream with my heart racing and the taste of ozone in my mouth, like I've been too close to a lightning strike. The feather is always warmer afterward, just a little, just enough to notice. I think someday I'll have to go back, not because I want to, because the mountains will call me back, because the watchman on Carrion Ridge isn't finished with me yet, because there are things in the high places that demand witnesses, even if we don't understand what we're witnessing. But not yet. For now, I stay in the lower elevations. I take the easy trails. I let other rangers handle the high peaks and the overnight stays. And on clear nights, when the mountains are visible from my window, I look toward Raven's Peak and wonder if it's looking back, if the watchman is still there, standing on Carrion Ridge, still waiting, still watching, still remembering.